chains of office. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to call to order the Town of Collingwood's Development and Operations Services Standing Committee for February 13, 2023. To start with the land acknowledgement, Deputy Mayor Fryer, could you please assist?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The Town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
Thank you. In terms of the adoption of the agenda, the motion would be as follows: that the content of the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee agenda for February 13, 2023 be adopted as amended, and there's 3 amendments listed. Addition of staff report, PW 2023-01, Water Compliance Report. 2, addition of staff report PW 2023-03, reduced loads review and oversized weight bylaw update. And 3, addition of appendix to staff report PW 2023-05, transit advertising update. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Baines, are there any further amendments requested? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? If you see any during the course of the meeting, please raise them at that time. Would there be any business arising from the previous meeting? Seeing none, we're on to deputations. And the first one, this would be Knowles, who, if he could please come forward. This is titled Active Transportation and Future Road Construction Projects. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak with you today. This is my second time here in a week, so I hope I don't wear out my welcome. But anyway, Mayor Hamlin, councillors, staff, and also to the public, I'd like to spend a little bit of time here, I guess, just talking about some of the things that are underway right now and some of the details maybe of how some changes are taking place specifically with respect to active transportation on the roads. So if I have the first slide, please, Robin. Oh, okay, that's the second one, isn't it? Or did somebody steal one? Oh, there we go. So just for everybody's awareness, our strategic approach as we're looking at things in the Trails and Active Transportation Committee is basically we're trying to look at journeys, trying to look at it from the point of view of users. So although you can see from that slide that the engineering budget and the trails budget are 2 separate entities and 2 separate lines on the budget, we try and think of them as one, and we really don't concern ourselves too much whether we're trying to get with an on-road or an off-road situation or a combination of the 2. We're trying to look at the journey. Next one, please, Robin. Next one. Oh, okay. So here's our sort of vision of Collingwood in 2030, and if anybody would like it to happen quicker than this, that'd be just fine. But these are the main things that we figure are the most important things for us right now. And the first one is obviously safety. So we're looking for a safe town, safe separated north-south and east-west corridors, and we're looking for safe road crossings at all high-traffic intersections. Second thing on our list is basically connections and connectivity. All active transportation activities are really consistent or at least continuous. So we're looking at how things happen out there in the street, whether it's a trail, whether it's a road or a sidewalk. We're looking to make sure that that can be continuous and it's seamless between the various ways that you might travel around town. The third part is, of course, our goal is to become a gold bicycle-friendly community. We currently have a silver status. A lot of work went into doing that, and there will be even more work required to get gold status in this particular award. If we can do that, we'll join a very elite group of municipalities. There are only 3 in the province of Ontario that have gold status, one being Toronto, the other being Ottawa, and the third being Kitchener-Waterloo. So we will be the first, I'll call it smaller community, to be successful at this if we can do it. And the one thing just at the bottom that you can see there is the word visibility. The reason why we've put that up there is if you're on a road, you're in a car, you know where you're supposed to go. You're on the road, it's yours. If you're a pedestrian, the sidewalk is yours. If you're driving a bicycle, things are not quite so clear for everybody. Sometimes you could be on a sidewalk, sometimes you could be on a trail. So we're really looking to increase the visibility of the active transportation network within the town. Quick map of the town, a couple of circles in it. The first circle, the inner circle, is 1 kilometer radius from Town Hall, or roughly a 15-minute walk. The outer circle is about a 3 kilometer radius from Town Hall, basically about a 15-minute bike ride. So this is what we're trying to, and we want to encourage people to do. Leave your car at home. If you're within one of these ranges, you can probably get there just as fast by walking as you could by spending the time to get in your car, drive downtown, park the car, get out of the car. It's probably just as quick to either walk or take a bike if you're within that range. The other thing to notice on the map is if you look at all the red lines which represent the trails are obviously sort of around the periphery of the downtown. Once you get right into the downtown part of Collingwood, which I just refer to as the tree streets and the number streets, there are no trails. So now you're on the road. And that's where the connectivity issue is starting to become more and more important to us, is to make sure that once you get into town and you're on the roads, you have a safe place to travel. I know most of you have seen this one. I won't spend much time at it, but who's our target audience? It's the people on the left of that particular picture. Represent maybe 50 to 55% of the people who would be willing to use a bike in town. These are people who probably are very comfortable on the trails, but probably not so comfortable when they have to interface with vehicles on the roads. So that's the people that we really want to get. They represent such a large majority of the people who are on bikes. Next, please, Robin. I know you've seen this one before too. This is as a result of the new OTM Book 18. This is the nomograph that suggests or recommends what type of facility you should have for active transportation. The white area that you can see in the bottom left is called shared operating space. That's just a road, and you're out there on a bicycle with the cars just like any other vehicle. The light green area is considered to be a designated cycling area, otherwise known as a bike lane, and just a standard unprotected bike lane. Once you get out into the dark green, you're looking at some kind of either protected bike facility or a completely off-road bike facility. And I would just highlight the numbers on the bottom, which represent the number of vehicles per day down at the bottom versus the speed at the top. And once you know those two things, you just X marks the spot and it will tell you the preferred type of active transportation facility that you should be building. Just draw your attention to two numbers. The ones at the bottom, once you get over 3,000 cars per day, you should not be just shared operating space. Once you get over about 6,000 cars per day, you should not be even looking at an unprotected bike lane facility. Next, please. So what we did earlier on this year is we took the 2019 traffic study and looked at a whole bunch of streets. I've got a couple up here as examples. But if you look at Mountain Road, you can see highlighted in yellow there the vehicles per day in 2019. and the vehicles per day forecasted for 2031. Obviously, both of those numbers are significantly bigger than 6,000 vehicles per day. So you look at what we have a multi-use path. Cycling plan shows a multi-use path. What we should have is an off-road facility. And at the last meeting that was here, when the EA revision for Mountain Road was put forward, removing the bike lanes was part of that EA because you were well in excess of the number of vehicles that should be traveling by unprotected bike lane facilities. Just go to 6th Street as another example. Same type of thing. Over the 6,000 now, the forecast is to be about double the 6,000. Right now we have bike lanes. Cycling plan currently shows bike lanes. Realistically, with the new nomograph, you should be looking at some kind of an off-road facility. And the same would apply for Cambridge Street. See the numbers there for yourself, but realistically, with a forecast of almost 12,000 vehicles per day, at some point you want to go with an off-road facility and not bike lanes. Next, please, Robin. One other thing that is in the cycling plan right now, and I know you can't read this, but it doesn't really matter that much. There are a number of things in the cycling plan that suggest interim solutions. Interim solutions are simply, let's put some paint down on the road, put a few signs up, and, you know, we're there. Obviously, with a speed limit in town for all of our normal residential streets of 50 kilometers per hour, and the nomograph telling you anything over 40, you should not be having a shared facility with vehicles. Really, all of those interim solutions are not recommended as part of the new OTM Book 18. So the X is there just to highlight some of them. Probably not move forward with. Next. And then basically the end here, the key messages. For us, the OTM Book 18 has changed the landscape noticeably. And I know I've talked to a lot of people around town. As soon as you talk active transportation, the first thing they throw out is, yeah, we need a bike lane. Well, really not anymore. Bike lane is not a recommended solution for any kind of road where the vehicle traffic is greater than about 6,000 vehicles per day. The other thing that's there, obviously, the interim solutions are really no longer a short-term answer for the issue here in town, for obvious reasons, again, of the speed. So I guess our recommendations at this point in time, number one, we're really happy to see that we're doing a master transportation plan. Encourage people who are going to be involved with this to expedite this as quickly as is humanly possible so that we can get that finished. And obviously, as the Trails and Active Transportation are, you know, willing and looking to actively contribute to the process of coming up with that master transportation plan. And then one last comment, which I think I made last week as well. We're kind of at a critical point right now in the town of Collingwood for active transportation. The budget this year, there are a whole bunch of streets that have some engineering work underway for a variety of different reasons. I could list them off: Mountain Road, 10th Line, High Street, 6th Street, 3rd Street, Peel Street. Like the list goes on. These are all our main active transportation corridors through the center of town. So we have this opportunity now when these works get done. This is our moment. And if we miss this moment and we allow these roads to get rebuilt without the proper infrastructure, probably cooked for another 20 or 25 years. So that's the message for this evening. Thank you very much for your time. And if there are any questions, I will do my best.
Thank you so much for delivering this to us. These are all things council talks about, and certainly they're all top of mind for me as mayor. I talked to our CEO today knowing that you were coming, and because of directions that have come from council and our community, our master transportation plan has been moved into a 2023 deliverable. And it now will also include active transportation components, which is a first for our community. So thank you for your hard work and for your committee, because through your hard work, I think keeping our eye on the ball on these kind of important issues that we all feel, we'd all love to have more active transportation to take advantage of. Yeah. Are there any questions at the moment? Councillor Doherty? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Marie and the committee, for such a thorough and insightful report. I have a couple of, I guess they're more rhetorical questions more than anything, but it just occurs to me when you were talking about the fact that Trails operates under two departments, that, it really does work against us from time to time. And I really hope that we can find an opportunity to create one budget and have Trails having a strategic direction that fully incorporates the other two departments as opposed to the other way around. And I think that we can make many more advancements much more quickly. With regard to Book 18 and their very limited view of bike lanes now, and you referred specifically to 6th Street, where we do have a bike lane now. If we were to create a separated bike lane, even separated with bollards, would that be considered equivalent to a separate facility, according to Book 18? Because I just see 6th Street as being a difficult challenge right now.
No question. And if you look around Toronto, you'll see a lot of bike lanes there with just bollards and something up the side as a protection. Certainly that would be a huge improvement. And I'm sure that people would feel safer there. I'm not sure where the design process sits exactly on 6th Street, but I think the consultant was looking at doing something that would be an off-road facility as opposed to just a bike lane with bollard protection. So that would be even better, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, that's something to keep in mind. And just one other thing. You note that in our cycling plan that there were a number of temporary treatments that could be done on some of our streets, but now with Book 18 and a 50-kilometer speed limit, that they're no longer viable. So does that suggest that if we reduce the speed town-wide to 40 kilometers an hour, does that give us the opportunity to install these less expensive, more immediate temporary treatments of these roads?
I'll say yes, because if you just take a look at the nomograph and you look at the number of vehicles per day and you look at the speed and you X marks the spot, you will be within the white section. I would hope that we're trying to do Maple Street this year. There is some work going on Maple Street, and hopefully we get some traffic calming there, and we'll get some real life experience, I guess, because I would hope that one of the plans of doing the traffic calming there would be to reduce the traffic or the speed on that street to 40, as opposed to having it 50.
Right. I see this as a real argument for a town-wide reduction, for sure. Anyway, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just suggest, Councillor Doherty, whether it's this meeting or a future one, if you want to think about bringing back a notice of motion on the combining of the budget.
Thank you.
Issues. Yeah.
Will do.
Okay, so thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
The next deputation this evening is on accessible public transit. Mr. Ireland, are you making that deputation?
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Hamlin, Town Council, staff. Always a pleasure to see you again. In honor, it is my honor to introduce Casey Morrison, whom most of you know, to speak to you this evening about accessibility for residents of Collingwood with disabilities and the challenges of traveling around town, regardless of weather conditions, their destination, and the availability of on-demand, door-to-door transit service. Casey?
Good evening, Mayor Hamlin, Deputy Mayor Bryan, and members of Collingwood Town Council and staff. I'm Casey Morrison, and I am trying to make our town more accessible for all. Please understand that what you have canceled, on-demand transit, takes away independence and quality of life for a group of people that have had their independence for 15 years. The Transit Plus is basically the old Red Cross service. The old Red Cross service needed us to book days in advance. But if a person needed to go to a doctor's appointment, they would cancel my ride. Until Transit Plus can operate an on-demand service, we very much need on-demand transit to come back operating soon as possible, because we have no transportation to pick us up in rain or snow. To keep our independence, hours of operation for the new Transit Plus is another issue to fix. If we have an on-demand option for transit, meeting with you today, I could count on transportation without booking days ahead. We wouldn't need to know when this meeting ends. For example, the last deputation was delayed, and if we had to book in advance, would need to leave before the meeting finished to get a ride. Councillor Jeffrey, back 16 years ago you were on the council that had the forward thinking to provide the accessible taxi for the people in Collingwood and the area. This created a barrier, free and safe environment for everyone. It has worked well ever since 2007. When our accessible taxi was here, I could go to my volunteering jobs. I could go home early from a volunteering job when I was feeling sick. We could go out and not have to be on a schedule to get back home. I could go to gym in stormy weather and getting it again at 9 p.m. We could go shopping when we choose, not book days ahead. We could go to meet someone for lunch, or dinner, or movies. Because they ask you now, if my chair was to break down or my power got low, I could call for a ride. Through the years, my family and I have advocated for all physically challenged to be included. I was able to go to our neighborhood schools. I could only take classes in I on the ground floor. We advocated to put an elevator to access the whole school, so everyone would be included in the future. Also, a door opener at the town hall to make easy access for all. I worked very hard to get an on-demand service for all in wheelchairs. I'm a very social person, so I want to go out now because the last 3 years I couldn't go out because of the pandemic. On the news, they are promoting mental health well-being after COVID by being social, having our on-demand transit. I could come and go just the same as you and everyone else and not feel like a second-class citizen. It makes being in a wheelchair more of a challenge. When transportation is taken away, especially in winter months, I felt very safe when we had the on-demand service. But now, I don't feel safe because when it suddenly starts to be raining, snowing, hailing, etc., now I don't have a ride. Tonight, I'm asking that you bring back our on-demand service until Transit Plus can provide that same service. Like my town of Collingwood pin says, a place to live, work, and play. Thanks for taking your time to listen to me.
Thank you, Casey. Do you have any questions? I don't know about you, but I found that very moving. It's the reality of the situation when you're confined to a chair. And you know, I respectfully request that when you leave here tonight, snow or no snow, rain or no rain, and walk down those stairs to get in your car and go home, you think about Casey and how he'll make his way home. Was he able to pre-book a pickup 2 or 3 days ago? How will he estimate the time of pickup, considering the variables that he was describing earlier? We don't know how long the meeting would go on. We knew there were other deputations, and that's fine. But obviously, he could miss his ride home quite easily under the circumstances. But if we had the on-demand service back, he might have a 15 to 30-minute wait. So he has to think about these factors every time he pre-books 2 or 3 days in advance. And that goes for Catherine and Bryan Beacock, who unfortunately can't be here tonight. He suffered a seizure this afternoon and is at the hospital. Nonetheless, we'll book another deputation for Bryan. Anyway, so I do request that when you leave here tonight, think about that. And hopefully we can get this thing done. I had in my notes, obviously I'm a little upset right now, but I had in my notes that I respectfully request that before you leave here tonight, you put forth a motion to reestablish on-demand door-to-door transit service and extend the service until at least midnight, 7 days per week. Tomorrow, Valentine's Day, somewhat appropriate. Not March the 1st or some other date. These requests will earn you the respect and will be proof that you dignify and respect all residents of Collingwood. I don't expect you to have any questions. But
I have a few comments. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
Council is all ears, and we've heard you. Of course, you've been here several times now with this message. We have asked our staff to come back with some solutions to address this. We have asked that ones that will require significant budget impact come back for 2024. I'm going to ask our CAO just to give a brief update of where they are right now, the staff that is. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin, and also thank you to the speakers and the folks who are here to support them. The accessibility rules for all municipalities are set by the province. So with respect to those rules, the town is meeting them for both transit and taxis. The Transit Plus service does provide assisted door-to-door service. It is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. For a transit fare, which would be $2 for adults and $1.50 for students or seniors. They can be booked in that almost real-time period, so the half hour to hour in the slower periods, such as the evening. But you are entirely correct. You may need to book up to 3 days in advance for a busy period, such as through the midday. I am not aware, and I'd certainly be happy to look into people being bumped from their service. That certainly is not something I've heard about before. So thank you for mentioning that. I hope that it's not happening, and may have been something in the Red Cross time potentially, but not the current period. Oh, sorry. Mayor's just mentioned to me that I've misspoken. It's 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. service. If I said 7 p.m., I was incorrect. Thank you. The fares and operating hours are the same for everyone, the conventional transit and the Transit Plus. And unfortunately, the private business that had been providing accessible taxi service has now stopped that service. They had come to the town about 27 months ago, so that was in September of 2020, and asked if council could support them, as it wasn't viable to continue that service at that time. So for 27 months or so, we have, council had determined that they would continue that service. And the service that is currently in place, so the Transit Plus service, is the one that has been procured to replace the current taxi type business here in town. All of our conventional buses are already accessible as well, and for example, can accommodate persons needing wheelchair assistance, but you do need to go to the bus stop to get those. There's a really good story here in that the Transit Plus ridership is actually double what we had estimated at the time the study was completed. So to me, that means that we've got a lot of people in our community that are being able to get out on the Transit Plus bus and are using it to get to the things of daily life that we all love to go to. The on-demand software that goes with our transit renewal is being put into place through 2023, and we will transition to using it, and hopefully also move to this scheduling option for Transit Plus as well as one of the options for scheduling pickups and rides. We will keep council and the public informed as we implement these positive changes, and thank you.
Thanks for that summary. I also wanted to say, I've been thinking, what could council do also? And I want to say I'm going to bring a motion forward later, and I'm going to ask council to consider 4 things that I do as mayor on behalf of council. One would be to write the province, because they set the accessibility requirements, and would have to provide some funding to go with them. So if they increased their requirements, it would be better for our community. So I think it would be worthwhile for a letter to come from our community to the Premier and the responsible ministers, asking them to review and implement better accessibility standards. The second thing is in our community, these kind of, I'll call them soft social services, all of the tax dollars for that go to the county. Like a considerable amount of our property taxes we collect goes to the county. And from those, the social services are provided. So I'm also suggesting that we reach out to the warden of the county and the county council and ask them to consider putting some funding into a higher level of accessible transit, such as you're talking about in our community, and probably other communities in this area that are also in Simcoe County. The third thing I thought of is that because I know there's been some discussion at some of the meetings where you've spoken about our residents being at the hospital and being released after 9 p.m. and how are they going to get home. So I suggest that I also, on behalf of council, should be writing and reaching out to the chair of the board at the hospital and the administration and seeing if we can't get a system in place with them to arrange for, an orderly transition out of the hospital. And if it means, making sure that their patients who rely on this kind of service are released by 8 o'clock, so be it, or they keep them overnight, or there has to be a practical solution there we can reach with the hospital. So I'd be also prepared to do that. And lastly, when I came into my office today, I saw the agenda for what is a regular meeting of a regional group of mayors and CEOs that happens. And it rotates among different municipalities in this immediate area. And there's one that's scheduled now for this Friday. And item 2 on the agenda is accessible transit system. So the fourth thing would be is that I raise this specific issue on Friday and see if there's some way jointly we can start addressing this, or if they have any other ideas. So that's I've been thinking about this, and certainly don't want you to go away thinking we don't care, because we do. And I'm prepared to put this to our council in a motion. And also, as our CEO says, we're so hopeful that as our Transit Plus system gets more fully booked and used, and our on-demand transit system gets unfolded in the coming months, that there's going to be some happy meeting here of the buses and staff and so on, knowing what the needs are.
Can I make another suggestion?
It's
Real quick.
okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
But I won't comment or anything. You just
Oh, that's
yeah, go
fine.
ahead.
I would like to volunteer our little group, Casey and Catherine Bloomfield, who's over on my right, and Bryan when he gets well, to be able to communicate firsthand and, share with you the difficulties and, what the logistics of what they have to go through. I know that, you've got the buses are fully equipped and all that, but I think sometimes even myself being involved with them now on almost a daily basis, I miss stuff. And I think we could fill in those blanks for you. And
I think that'd be helpful.
I think it would too. So
Okay. Yeah,
I'll send you an email and we'll work something out and we'll go from there.
that sounds great.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, did everybody see the new accessibility logo that was unveiled for, actually, the first ones are going into Sunset Beach, right? And Catherine was the one
Yeah,
that was
we did see
responsible
those.
for it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Nice work.
Thank you.
and thank you very much.
And I think Councillor Jeffrey, did you have a question?
Not for the deputants, but I do understand what Casey is describing, and I have seen him stranded and not knowing how I can help. But anyway, how I can help is through our decisions here. So I was just wondering if one of the things that staff are considering or putting together for us, and I did hear the report, but I didn't hear timelines. And I would be interested in the timeline of that information coming back through the CAO. But also, was one of the things we're investigating the town doing its own service. We subsidize a lot of things. Will that be one of the things that we'll be investigating that we could put together on our own, and maybe as a region per your meeting on Friday? But I know it's come up a couple times at our discussions around the table. Can we just create our own service and do the hiring necessary by contract to do just that? So I guess my questions are through the CAO. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think these are some of the things we've been discussing through the budget process, but over to you, CAO.
Thank you, through you to Councillor Jeffrey. It's our intention to bring a report back next month. We hope that we'll be able to provide the options we've looked at and then check in on if we've missed any. And I did just hear you suggest one, so we'll make sure we cover that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, the next item, that's it for our deputations this evening. The next item on our agenda are 2 planning services updates from our planning director, Valentine. Maybe we'll just wait 1 minute while the room clears. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you also to the clerk's team for accommodating these 2 operational updates earlier in the meeting. They have been deferred a couple of times now, and in addition to committee, the primary audience is the public, and we do certainly want to ensure that they are able to hear these updates. So the first update, Madam Chair, is around the Ontario Land Tribunal. And just as a reminder, the Ontario Land Tribunal is the body that adjudicates land use planning disputes in Ontario. And the town routinely has a number of active OLT appeals at any given time. This is actually not for a presentation, it's just verbal, in case you're struggling to find the right presentation here. So this evening, we'd like to provide 4 public updates on active Ontario Land Tribunal appeals, and I'll be calling that the OLT if I could. It will help me not stumble over my words. And for the benefit of the new councillors, these OLT matters are all considered active litigation. So we really are quite scoped and limited in terms of what we can discuss in public, but we can certainly provide process updates to the public as they arise. So the first grouping of appeals I'd like to cover is for Zoning Bylaw Amendment 2022-007. And I know that you haven't memorized all of our bylaw numbers. So for clarity, this is the appeal to the zoning bylaw amendment that was recommended as one of 3 implementation tools from our land use policy study stemming from the interim control bylaw, and to ensure that the municipality had the tools in place to transparently allocate municipal servicing capacity. And as long as these appeals stay in place, the interim control bylaw does remain in effect automatically under the Planning Act. So, excuse me, as you can imagine, we are quite anxious to resolve or otherwise dispose of these appeals. So where we are today is we had a case management conference that was held by the tribunal on September 8th. And a case management conference is the first step in most OLT proceedings. It's where processes are discussed, things like who would be involved in a hearing, how long would a hearing potentially take, what are the outstanding issues, are there any issues that can be resolved, the number and type of witnesses that we would be expecting, and so on. So it's basically a first procedural touch point. At the case management conference, individuals can request to be parties or participants in the appeal. And the difference between those 2 groups is parties are able to call evidence. They're typically represented by legal counsel, and they participate in negotiations with the municipality around the appeal. And participants also participate, but they are generally limited to providing written submissions. So for this particular appeal, at the case management conference, there were party status was granted to 3 groups. The first was Tokyo Smoke, which is a proposed cannabis retail outlet. The second was Nova Cannabis. And the third was the proponents for 2 other files that are also under appeal to the tribunal called Bridgewater and Consulate West. And those are located at the northerly end of the town. And the tribunal also granted participant status to the representatives of the Huntingwood developments. So we did get a hearing scheduled for the 31st of this year, and the tribunal has set aside 9 days for this proceeding. So if you might remember, this is actually a bucket of 3 appeals, one of which we've managed to resolve, and staff continue without prejudice discussions to resolve or otherwise confirm withdrawal of the remaining 2 appeals. And we have very high hopes that we can achieve this before the January 31st hearing date. And that would allow the interim control bylaw to be lifted. So we've been before council several times in camera about these appeals, and we've had direction provided to staff and the solicitor, and we will provide further updates as things progress. So, Madam Chair, we'll just move on to the second appeal, which is 452 Ragland. This is an appeal related to a non-decision of a draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment, which would facilitate a development in the west end of town. We do have an entire webpage with the background of this proposal, and certainly if members of council or anyone in the public does want to learn more about it, please contact staff and we can help you access that webpage should it be of interest. And to clarify what I mean about a non-decision appeal is that the council did not make a decision on these applications within the time frame allowed under the Planning Act, and the applicant exercised their right to appeal because of a decision was not made in a timely manner. So again, we've had that first step in front of the tribunal. A case management conference was held on November 16th. Of 2022, and the tribunal granted participant status to eight individuals who are generally neighbors in the vicinity of that development proposal. The next touch point that we have is coming up very soon on February 21st, which is another case management conference to iron out some of the process details. You will recall that we had a non-statutory public meeting on the 23rd, of January for this particular file, and that provided an opportunity for us as staff and you as council to hear the opinion and feedback from the public before taking a position on this appeal. So now that we've had the public meeting, staff are working on developing a professional opinion, and we'll be bringing that forward through to council for direction in the near future. And then finally, Madam Chair, we have two appeals that have actually been running in parallel, though they are separate matters, and they're running in parallel because the same ownership group owns both of the parcels. The first is known as the Bridgewater Appeal, and it's related to an approved draft plan of subdivision where the proponent actually came back in and applied for a zoning bylaw amendment to increase the density on the site. And again, in this case, the municipality failed to make a decision within the required timelines, and the developer exercised their right of appeal. There is similarly a project page for this proposal, so if you want more information or members of the public want to access background information, we can certainly assist as needed. The other component of this appeal, which is called Consulate West, is more of a long-standing matter. It's an appeal that goes all the way back to 2004, when the town approved the official plan that's currently in effect. The owner was seeking to redesignate their rural lands to allow for urban-type development. And the main issues around this appeal were related to protection of sensitive environmental features, as well as the appropriateness of the conversion of land for growth in that particular area. Again, case management conferences were held in September for both of these appeals. At the management conference, there was one party granted participant status, and that was the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. And a hearing date was set for May the 17th of this year, and 3 days were set aside for that hearing. And this matter did come previously before council for direction, and that was provided to the town solicitor, and staff and the solicitor will come back as needed again in camera as things progress on that appeal. So thank you, Madam Chair. That does conclude the update on the active Ontario Land Tribunal hearings. We do have an update on the official plan review, but perhaps I should pause to see if there's any questions at this time.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Baines.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Director Valentine. Just a question of clarification. You had mentioned on the first file, which were the two cannabis shops in Bridgewater and I think Huntington, that the hearing would be on the 31st of this year. Can you say which month?
Oh my goodness, my apologies. And through you, Madam Chair, if I neglected to say the month, it's July 31st.
Thank you.
No other
Good
questions.
catch, yeah. Oh, did you have the same question? No, go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. These are more on the general comments, and just to clarification through to Director Valentine. I know that we define the non-decision as that it has not been considered by council, but council can't consider it if it doesn't get here. So I'd like to clarify with the public that it's not council delaying, it's the volume of work that our staff have, and in the cases, it's just not able to get to council on time. So I'd just like to clarify that point, if that's correct. And the other thing I'd just like to know is, do we have an idea of the number of developers who would be in a position currently to appeal on non-decision?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the councillor. Certainly, volume of applications is one reason that appeals of non-decision happen, but there's a number of others. And, the Planning Act doesn't really set municipalities up for success in terms of dealing with all of the required peer reviews and other circulations and examinations to ensure that the plans represent good planning. So it is quite a challenge, not just for the town of Collingwood, but municipalities across the province to meet the very tight Planning Act timeframes. In terms of how many applications would be in appeal position, I would say quite a few. I don't have the exact number before me, but Manager Ayers and I can certainly go back through our records and provide a response to council.
Good information for us. Thank you.
If I could just follow up on that, because I had understood, Director Valentine, that with the changes that are always being made to the Planning Act by the province, that all municipalities are now in an impossible position, as you've mentioned. In other words, by the time you get the application in and you circulate it to all the agencies who have to comment, and in certain cases we have to get peer reviews ordered because we don't have the expertise in-house, as we're not huge department of all specialties here. It's just impossible to meet these timelines. And has there been any discussion among your peers at other municipalities of how they're going to, address this? Like, what do we do? Because I understand too, the province is implementing, you have to get the fees back if you don't meet the timelines for approval. And you may not be prepared to answer this tonight. And if you're coming back with the list, I'd be prepared to wait for that. But I am just so curious to know practically, how are we going to handle this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I could provide a brief response at this point in time. Certainly, Bill 109 and the requirement for municipalities to return land use planning fees as the timelines or as any decision would go beyond the timelines in an incremental manner, that has certainly spurred many municipalities to look at their processes. We do have a process and fees review, which is upcoming, and we're in the procurement stage, very close to an award. So that's one avenue. And then we also are planning a staff report to make changes with respect to any bylaws and policies that we can, kind of as low-hanging fruit in advance of that process review to respond to Bill 109. Many municipalities have included more robust pre-consultation processes and fees, and trying to potentially move some of that peer review work into the pre-consultation timeline, so before the Planning Act clock starts ticking. And there's also many municipalities that now refuse to accept concurrent applications. So, for example, a site plan is a 60-day turnaround time under the Planning Act, where a zoning bylaw is 90 days and an official plan amendment is 120. If you accept them all at the same time, you're going to be in appeal position for your site plan long before you get through your principle of a development through the official plan amendment. So that's some of the discussions we've been having amongst peers in Simcoe County and beyond. So there's a couple of avenues that council will hear more about these processes.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to state that these are matters that are of very high importance right now with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and they are advocating aggressively with the province. In fact, they did do a presentation today, and I will be providing a summary under other business tonight. But we are, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario is advocating for some changes to some of the new legislation that has come forward, or some kind of compensation or assistance for the municipalities to be able to comply with the new guidelines and regulations. So sort of a two-pronged approach.
Okay, we'll look forward to hearing on that. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And kind of a similar thought I wanted to just inquire about and make sure the public understood, because as you're talking about here is we are faced with some provincial regulations that are hard to overcome in some cases. But even though you've extensively described where we're at on these from an officious standpoint and such, we still make attempts on a reconciliation, not necessarily having to go right through to the end of the process. We're willing to work with developers. We've proven that in one case where we've been able to resolve. So I just want to make sure that it's understood that we continue to work as we can to try to resolve them without getting to the final formal ruling stage. So. Excellent presentation, Director Valentine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And shall I continue with the official plan
Yes,
update?
please.
Unless there's any more questions on OLT matters. Okay. So as a quick reminder, the official plan is essentially the blueprint for our community in terms of land use, growth, and change for the next 20 years. Official plans are required to be reviewed periodically under the Planning Act, and the town of Collingwood has been undertaking our comprehensive review for a couple of years now. The project certainly did suffer some delays due to COVID, as many projects were, and as a redirection of resources around the recent ministerial zoning order project. But we are happy to say that we did bring the project back on track in mid-2022, and you did see the release of the first draft of the official plan late last summer. So since that time, a few matters have arisen that would impact the delivery of the next draft of the official plan. I'd like to go through those now. So first is a very happy story. We are closing in on nearly 200 comments that we've received on the circulation of the first draft of the plan, and they continue to come in, and we are absolutely thrilled with the community interest and engagement in this project. We do understand from our planning consultant, who's got 30 plus years in the business undertaking plan reviews for municipalities of all sizes, that this is the highest volume of comments he has ever seen on any official plan review. So we are very excited that the public and other stakeholders are so interested in this process. And we know that the input of the public, of agencies, Indigenous communities, stakeholders, these are all critical to the land use planning process. And we ask for these comments because we want to review every one in great detail and look at how to respond accordingly and make the necessary policy changes. So the comments range from very generalized insights to very site-specific matters. And we want to provide this council with very clear feedback and a strong rationale for any changes that we would be recommending to the official plan that will come from these comments. But that process does take time. So we certainly want to balance bringing forward an official plan or the next draft thereof quite quickly. But we also want to demonstrate that we've heard members of the public and we have responded to their comments. And just for further clarity, though we are very grateful and excited about the interest in the official plan review, we don't have the resources or budget to write back individually by email or by letter to every individual who commented, but we will be providing a comment and response matrix with the next version of the official plan, and it will cover every submission, though they will be grouped together with similar comments. So the second aspect that we wanted to cover is, as you know, and as we've just discussed, Bills 109 and 23 were passed by the province to facilitate the construction of 1.5 million homes in the next decade. And those bills have significant consequences on land use planning policies and processes, as well as land economics. And we're really just starting to understand the breadth of of the impact of those bills. We do want to ensure that the next draft of the official plan does appropriately respond to those legislative requirements, and also, if we can, limit the risks of any unintended consequences of the bill where possible. So that also includes reviewing the county of Simcoe official plan. You might recall that under Bill 23, the county will no longer have any land use planning responsibilities, and the lower tier municipalities would have to incorporate aspects from the upper tier plan into our planning documents. So we want to take a proactive step to look at at any operative policies from the town of Simcoe that should be included in, did I say it again? The county of Simcoe, that should be included in the town's official plan. And to add on to that complexity, the province is currently consulting on changes to our larger planning documents, the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, again, to facilitate the supply of housing. And if those change significantly, especially in the near term, our guiding documents just shifted, and we'll have to review the draft official plan against those documents and ensure changes are translated into policy. And then thirdly, Madam Chair, and lastly, the growth management official plan that did represent the first phase of the county's municipal comprehensive review was adopted by County Council. It's under consideration for approval of the province, and that basically sets the growth and settlement context for the town. And notwithstanding the lack of clarity around the county's future role in land use planning, if the province does approve that MCR-related update, it does need to be incorporated again into the town's official plan. We'd also like to take a closer look at how the MZO impacts our growth and settlement numbers. As you know, there's a large volume of housing opportunities that are being proposed at the Poplar Health and Wellness Village, as well as a change in employment for those lands. So we do need to incorporate those matters into the next version of the plan. So those are the evolving matters. We do still feel like a reasonable target to bring forward the official plan would be later in March or April of 2023. So we hope to keep to that track. We're also planning interviews with council members, recognizing that there are so many new faces around the table prior to the review of the next draft, so we can better understand your perspectives, goals you might have for the official plan, and we can take you through some of the comments that we've received and the anticipated changes. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to provide that update.
Yeah, thank you. That's very, very helpful. Would there be any questions of Director Valentine? I have one. And again, this may be just for your, thought process, but with all the targets that have been released by the province that are ever shifting, but seem to be putting greater and greater burden on every community to provide more housing, I was interested to see the other day a reference to, I believe it was a draft regulation, and it was identifying that the province was looking to the top, say, 24 largest communities to give them sort of measurables back on whether the targets were being met for them. But it was quite silent on smaller communities like ours. And I was wondering if you had any information yet, or if you thought there'd be any in the future. What does that mean for us that we don't have to deliver measurables? And the fact they do, are they going to get money for infrastructure that we aren't? Or is it going to impact how we plan and what we should be planning for? And I know this is a really big question, and I didn't think of it till right now, so sorry I didn't ask you before. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we also saw that regulation through the ERO posting. And we do understand that at this time it is targeted to the couple dozen fastest growing urban centers, primarily in southern Ontario. But I will say that what Bill 23, or excuse me, it was 109, did was set up that potential for the province to include regulatory requirements for any municipality to report on their targets. So we're not in the bucket just yet, as you mentioned, but we could be at any time. So that does have potentially some resourcing requirements depending on the breadth of the reporting. And it does really range from housing units through to infrastructure. So it's not just necessarily focused on planning. I've certainly heard rumors that there may be an attachment to funding and reporting to those largest municipalities, but there's nothing substantiated that staff has received. Certainly, we will continue to monitor the situation, and if the reporting does or the regulation does shift to include the town of Collingwood, we'll be back in front of you with further updates and recommendations on where to go from here.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that's it for you.
Okay,
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to that portion of our agenda, which is our staff reports. And there are 4 presentations relating to the first 4 items. So the first one is 7.1. Now, let me just see here. Is that, who's giving that one? I don't have my... Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin and Council and the public for listening to our presentation this evening. This staff report and presentation is being brought forward through the Community-Based Strategic Plan as one of the goals that aligns with transparent and accountable local government, specific to the objection of enhancing public trust. This action item being report committee accomplishments in 2022 and highlighting their goals and priorities for 2023. Before you today, you'll see the Heritage Advisory Committee, which reports directly into the Development and Operations Standing Committee, as well as the Committee of Adjustment and Property Standards Appeal Committee, as they follow the same mandate as the Development and Operations Standing Committee. So, Robin, if you could please bring the presentation up. And then as soon as we have our presentation on the screen, I will introduce Justin Teakle, who is our staff resource on our Heritage Advisory Committee.
Right. That concludes your portion, Becky? Just checking.
It does.
Thank you. So the Heritage Committee is established under the authority of the Ontario Heritage Act, and their purpose is to provide advice and recommendations to Council on all matters in the Act in which Council is required to consult with the Committee under Part 4 and 5 of the Act, which relate to individual designated properties and heritage districts. The committee also provides advice and recommendations on other matters of cultural heritage conservation and is involved in other heritage initiatives, including education, promotion, the town's heritage incentive programs, which is tax relief and grants, as well as the Heritage Awards. And for the rest of the Heritage Committee slides, I'd like to call up to the podium Heritage Committee Vice Chair David Jeffries, who will take you through the next few slides on the Heritage Committee's accomplishments, goals, and priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of Council. In the next 4 slides, I'll go through our accomplishments and goals. I might just add that while we're established under the Ontario Heritage Act, in fact, this is the 86-page bylaw. It happened in 2 stages from 2002 and 2008, from which we do a lot of our reference and work. And that probably, in dealing with Part 5, the Heritage District, is probably what leads us to lots of issues before the public for which there may be controversy that happens from time to time. Generally speaking, our accomplishments, we conduct open, we're on the next slide there, conduct open public meetings which encourage community and stakeholder participation. We support significant projects on heritage properties. These have included 76 Hurontario Street, the Trot Block, 172 Hurontario Street, and the Dorchester, which has been a tremendous achievement in downtown Collingwood. We promote awareness of Heritage Week, and next week be a presentation on Heritage Week, which is also important that it's done during Heritage Month, Black Heritage Month. We have an important building that's been designated here in Collingwood. We work successfully and develop relationships with community organizations such as the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario and the Business Improvement Association for the Downtown. I would hope in the future we might also be involved with the Historical Society in Collingwood. We have a number of publications that have been very popular. We've done them both digital walking tours, but we find that the printed items that we produce are actually some of the most popular, and they run out fairly quickly. So we're trying to update them and reprint them as much as we can. And that includes 3 ones, one for the downtown Heritage District, but that includes the east side area, predominantly Minnesota Street, and the west side area, which are the tree streets. And many people who look at those areas may not realize that they are not part of any heritage district at this time. We also have a unique look-up tour, which encourages people to look at the architectural decoration that's on a lot of the upper buildings throughout the town. We provided this year an education booth at Farmers Market, and this is initially to start with a greater outreach to the public that deal with what the Heritage Committee is doing and the things that we do consider. We concluded and recognized Part 4 designation for 243 Birch Street, and I'll give you some advance notice that the intention to designate 310 7th Street and 294 Beach Street will be coming before you. As far as other accomplishments, go on to the next slide. We recognized exemplary restoration efforts at 240 Minnesota Street and 242 3rd Street with 2001 at 21 Heritage Awards. And during this period of time last year, we awarded 11 Heritage grants and received 13 applications for Heritage property tax relief. Now, in our goals for the next year, I'll deal with some of our continuing concerns about those 2 aspects of the work that we do. We made recommendations for 25 heritage permit applications. And as has been noted, I think several times, while we do a review and give our best analysis of what is in the bylaw, this is only a review and recommendation to council, and ultimately the final decisions are made by council with regard to what can be fairly sensitive issues with regard to heritage. We have active participation in the downtown modernization project and designated a community representative to sit on the design team for Main Street modernization. Last year, I also attended a conference in Ontario with regard to the challenges of accessibility in heritage buildings, and there are a lot of innovative ideas on how that can be accomplished. Other volunteer activities that members of the committee take part in include the Heritage website, the Collingwood terminals, which is part of the Heritage District, and we will be looking forward to receiving that information when it is made public and to do our review of what is being recommended. Education and community outreach sessions. Come to the item of Doors Open. Now, you have received directly from me a letter with regard to Doors Open. We had extensive consultation and work at the committee on how we might proceed with this. However, Doors Open, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have with regard to it. Doors Open was traditionally under the planning group and was done primarily focused on heritage buildings because many of them, especially in large cities like Toronto, no one could get into, and that's was an item that was the reason it sort of went to the heritage group. The reality is that if you want to make this a successful community item, you need a large number of buildings, not of which all the same buildings are seen each year. but we see it as an opportunity for economic development and promotion of the opportunities here. And it's beyond the scope and budget and staff capacity that the Heritage Group has. And so we'd like to certainly discuss that with you if we have the opportunity in the future. We think it is a tremendous opportunity, but because it requires a large volunteer group to work with, it's not something we want to keep making an initiative if it isn't something that council feels they want to get behind, if you want to put it that way. We think there are a lot of industrial groups and businesses that would like to participate, but again, this isn't something that's done as a volunteer item. This requires we're representing the town of Collingwood at this point. The emergency preparedness plan and policy, very important initiative, as we saw, and we'll discuss this at the next week for Heritage Week, but the town of Goderich was faced with a huge problem in this regard. And seeing as once you are in the midst of significant emergency situation where buildings have been damaged, either through flood, wind, having a preparedness plan is extremely important. Finally, we've had a team looking, or people who have been looking at the expansion, I would say more the creation of new heritage district. And that, again, there has been budget that was set aside previously for this, but that is no small undertaking. And again, that would be something that we would want to discuss, I think, with council, how that might proceed, because again, it can have a significant controversial aspect to it before it gets started. For our 2023 goals and priorities, to obtain commitment from council to increase the reserve fund for future expansion of the Heritage District or a new district, and that, I think, does require some discussion with you, I think. Develop a resource list for suggested materials and implement a self-registry system for suppliers and contractors. This is one of the great tools that we've had in dealing with members of the public coming before us who are faced with challenges and who want to do the best they can for their heritage building or in the Heritage District, but are faced with challenges on how to get this material and installations done cost effectively. And so we think that's a great resource. We would like to migrate the Heritage website, which currently is a separate item, onto the town website, the main website, and that's something that does take time to do and to do well. We want to launch a digital Heritage newsletter, enhance the social media presence of the Heritage programs that we currently have. Many people who may own buildings that they would like to see either designated or districts that they might want to be in, I think need to know more about what the programs are and what the opportunities are for that. We want to host a community education event and to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Downtown Heritage Conservation District, which is this year. That's a unique opportunity. Also, I think that it is important that all members of council are aware of what is in the bylaw, and they may have questions about why things are in that bylaw. The three architects who over a 6-year period reviewed and prepared this had a certain approach to the way heritage districts should be conducted, and they were done on a more traditional basis that was at that time. That didn't mean that there can't be discussion. It is not set for all time what was set in that bylaw, and maybe it is time that some of those items be reviewed. We will continue to update and enhance the Heritage Walking Tour brochures for community education and engagement in the heritage conservation. Continue to promote Heritage Week and annual awards program. Again, the prepare an emergency preparedness plan and policy with regard to heritage properties. As I noted, the town, some communities who have suffered significant damage as a result of rogue weather changes, which we are seeing more of, have not been prepared and have found themselves in a situation of losing some of their highest and best quality heritage buildings as a result of unforeseen weather events. We'd like to review the Heritage Grant Program. It has not been reviewed for an extended period of time, and the amount of money that's given individually is very limited. As inflation has crept up, the grant program that we have that is a real incentive for residents who own heritage buildings to improve and maintain those buildings is quite frankly woefully inadequate for what we're requiring people to do, or asking people to do, not requiring, but asking them to do. You have to remember that our grant program and our tax relief program is based upon the bylaw, and it will make statements that require the owners of those properties to do things that they may find very expensive, and that is use of wood windows, use of certain types of paint, certain types of materials that are more expensive to actually source and install. And finally, conclude and recognize Port Ford designations for 310 7th Street and 294 Beach Street, which will be coming. That concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them to the best.
Well, thank you for your presentation. It's very informative, and thank you for the hard work. I'd love your goals for 2023. We have more to discuss. Councillor Baines.
Through you, Madam Chair. When, if Doors Open were going to be this year, I assume that's under the province and the Ontario Heritage Trust that sets those dates?
Yes, what it is at the end of the year in 2000, right now, we have missed the deadline for 2023. At the end of the year, we have to then indicate to them by approximately the middle of December what buildings will be part of Doors Open and the information about them. So normally it would take about a 4 to 5 month period of which we are out talking to people who want to participate in this, make sure when they're going to be available, and then we indicate to them what week or what days we would like to participate. But at that point, we also have to be sure that we've got a pretty good line on our volunteer group that's going to be involved in it. And as I wrote to you, we would prefer to have large sponsors involved in this. That would be major corporations, example, Pilkington, Agnora, Distillery, groups like this. We see it as an opportunity for the town, and we would also like the municipality to open up major facilities to explain to taxpayers how the water system works, how the sewage treatment plant works, how specific items actually happen. So we see it as an opportunity to showcase capacity of the town, attract more investment, and come and work here as for job opportunities. So remember that with Doors Open, this is an opportunity for parents to bring their children, for visitors to come who've never been to Collingwood, that sort of thing. So it does, we have to start that at, no small task. It requires a staff member that we're reporting to and agrees with the process that we're taking.
Thank you. Just to follow up, if I might, and the approximate time, was it mid-May, as I recall?
Well,
but it could be any time?
It could be any time.
So side launch days?
Yeah, that's right. In meeting with events, Collingwood, and we have gone to the economic development, we have to dovetail this with other events that are happening here so that it is the appropriate date and we're not interfering with other people. In fact, we may be enhancing other people, but that takes time. That's not a...
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Just wait. I think I see another. Go ahead, Councillor Ray.
Just a comment through you, Mayor Hamlin. This is on the emergency preparedness plan, and you've got to be prepared, and I'm glad to see that you are working on that. You mentioned Godrich, and I'm wondering, how would we ever, or how would you ever, or how would any municipality be prepared for a disaster like that? Because I would assume that they would need provincial, federal, and probably a lot of insurance money to rebuild their whole heritage district.
I appreciate what you're saying, and exactly, depending on the level of damage that's taken place, for example, on a major tornado event, let's take that as an example, and you've lost a lot of buildings, your first thing is to try to recoup the material. Now, any cases right now without an emergency plan, you start demolishing and trucking off as fast as you possibly can in an effort to respond in that way. We can thank God that we're not in an earthquake zone area, but the plan is to know if you've got a major flood event, what are going to be the steps you do to attempt to retain the largest amount of the assets that you've got in the best way that you can. And I suppose it's not that you're going to be able to prepare for everything, but in the case right now, heritage considerations, by my understanding, wouldn't be acted by your emergency group. And in many cases, they are concerned about other aspects not related to that. So you may lose a significant part of what is your future economic tourist advantage, if you want to put it that way. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just say I will reach out to you about the doors open idea, because I think if we can get staff thinking about this and bringing something back to council, I think that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Right, I will introduce Lindsay Ayers next. She is our staff resource on the committee of Robin Shugan, who cannot be here this evening, as well as Adam Herod, who represents the Property Standards Appeal portion of this committee.
Hi, good evening. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, committee members and members of the public. Typically, the chair or vice chair, similar to Mr. David Jeffries of the Committee of Adjustment and Property Standards Appeal Committee, would deliver this presentation. But as council is aware, the committee term generally runs with the term of council. So new committee members were only appointed on January 23rd of this year, and a first meeting has not yet been held to establish a chair and vice chair of this particular committee. So that's why I am here this evening. So the Committee of Adjustment and Property Standards Appeal Committee is a quasi-judicial body that hears applications for minor variances and consents to sever property and property standards appeal applications. Consent applications, minor variance applications are required where a proposal cannot meet the intent of the zoning bylaw for the enlargement or extension of a building or structure that is legally non-conforming, or for the expansion of a non-conforming use. Consent applications are required when a property owner wishes to sever their property to create a new lot or lots when it is clearly evident that a registered plan of subdivision is not required in the public interest. Consent applications can also be required for technical or legal reasons, such as boundary adjustments, lot additions, easements, etc., that do not result in the creation of a new lot. And then with respect to the Property Standards Appeal Committee, those applications or requests to the committee, an owner or occupant upon whom a property standards order has been served that is not satisfied with the terms or conditions of the order can appeal the order to this appeal committee, and the committee hears the arguments of the appellant and the officer who issued the order and makes a decision with respect to the order. Next slide, please. In terms of the committee's accomplishments in 2022, the committee conducted open public meetings that encouraged community and stakeholder participation. They conducted fair and timely, consistent, and thorough review and decisions on 13 minor variance incidental applications, 8 minor variance applications, and 10 consent applications. And I would just differentiate between incidental minor variance and regular minor variance. Incidental applications are, they typically require very minimal review by staff. So it is a more straightforward reporting process to the committee versus those minor variance applications that require a more extensive review. And the 2022 accomplishments of the Property Standards Appeal Committee conducted fair, timely, consistent, and thorough review and decisions on one property standards appeal. And it is my understanding that that appeal was resolved during the 2022 year. Next slide, please. In terms of goals and priorities for the coming year, continue to conduct fair, timely, and thorough review of all applications, including on-site visits with respect to Committee of Adjustment applications. Continue to conduct fair, timely, and thorough review of all appeals with respect to the property standards appeals, and provide, as I mentioned, a number of new committee members are just joining us this year. So provide orientation training to new and returning committee members that addresses the roles and responsibilities of the committee, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and proper appeal procedures, including the statutory powers of the committee. Next slide, please. And with that, I would like to conclude the presentation by thanking our outstanding Heritage Committee and Committee of Adjustment Property Standards Appeal Committee members, including both those outgoing members and those recently appointed members, for your service. Thank you very much.
Before you go, I should just say, would be any members have a question? No, you're good. Thank you. So at this point, is there any member of the public who would like to address the report, which was the Collingwood Heritage Committee or the Committee of Adjustment report? Would there be anyone online, Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have some participants online this evening. If you'd be interested in speaking to the staff report, if you could please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And there's no one wishing to speak to this report at this time.
Thank you. So I'll read in the motion at this point. The staff report C 2023-08, annual report on board and advisory committee activities from 2022 and priorities for 2023, specific to those committees and boards that report directly to the Development and Operations Service Standing Committee, be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Fryer, Councillor Doherty. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next item is relating to P 2023-03, Collingwood Quay, OPA-ZBA. So, yes, Director Valentine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a microphone missing, so I'm awkwardly sitting between two. How's my volume, Aaron? Am I okay? Okay, good. So Community Planner Tika will make his way up to the podium, but I do have a couple of quick introductory remarks. The applications before you today would amend the principle of development for one of the final blocks within the Collingwood shipyards that is slated to move toward construction. We would note that the principle of development that is established through the official plan and zoning bylaw would set the framework for a detailed review at the site level. So this is not the end of the story. If committee and ultimately council does agree with the general parameters for this site through these amendments, a building permit would not be available until a site plan approval is provided in the future, and that would provide an opportunity to address any outstanding technical details and deal with matters such as securities and servicing capacity allocation. So to that end, you will see that to provide this council with some additional confidence in this regard, staff are recommending a holding provision to be applied to the property that would not be lifted, meaning development couldn't occur until firstly, servicing capacity is confirmed through the new batch approach under the SCAP. And that would happen at the time the project is shovel ready. And then secondly, until a site plan agreement is executed. And staff also do want to note that the shipyard's policies in the official plan, they're coming up on 20 years old. Incredibly, we did look up the date that they were originally approved. We do understand through history provided by a number of individuals that was a very comprehensive process undertaken at the time with a very high level of community buy-in for the way that the policies look today. However, official plan amendments can be considered, and those would be evaluated against good planning principles established in our policy and regulatory documents as they would apply to this site. And we did want to be very clear that there is a requirement for a public process, and in particular a public meeting to collect feedback on these proposed changes. And Community Planner Tickle, through his presentation, will summarize that process, what we heard, and how the comments have been addressed. Madam Chair, we would proceed to Community Planner Tickle, and we also understand that there are members from the proponents team in the audience here today. Should there be any questions that Council would like answered at this time?
Welcome, Community Planner Tickle. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So good evening, committee members. So this presentation will provide an overview of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for the lands known as Block 6 of the Shipyards or Collingwood Quay. The next slide. Oh, this slide. It's great. So this is a 2022 aerial image of the subject lands, which are located in the shipyards on the north side of Side Launch Way. Surrounding the site to the west is parkland for a future public plaza at the north end of here, Ontario Street, and the continuation of the waterfront promenade, the side launch basin of the harbour, and the residential shipyards neighbourhood beyond. To the east is a strip of parkland for the continuation of the waterfront promenade, with the dry dock basin and harbour beyond. To the north is the harbour, and to the south is Side Launch Way and commercial uses, specifically Mountain View Town Centre, which includes the Bank of Montreal, as well as Rexall and some other commercial uses. Next slide, please. Proposed development has had active applications with the town since June of 2020 when pre-consultation occurred. Applications for concurrent applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment were submitted on October 6th of 2021. The applications were deemed complete on November 25th, 2021, and a statutory public meeting was held on July 25th, 2022. The subject official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications have been extensively reviewed by town departments, external agencies, and third-party peer reviewers, and are now being recommended for approval. About the same time that this report was published, an application for site plan control was also submitted on February 8th of this year. Next slide, please. So this slide provides architectural renderings. Previous slide, please, Robin. So this slide provides architectural renderings of the development proposal for the site, which is a 6-story mixed-use building with commercial uses at grade alongside Launch Way and residential dwelling units behind and above. Most of the parking would be underground, with some surface parking for the commercial uses at the southwest corner of the site. The waterfront promenade would continue around the site adjacent to the harbor edge. Next slide, please. In order to achieve the vision on the previous slide, some policy amendments are required to the official plan and the zoning bylaw. The next few slides will go through the existing policies and the proposed amendments. In terms of the existing land use designations, the Town of Collingwood official plan designates the subject property as shipyards. More specifically, Schedule A1 provides refined land use designations specific to the shipyards and designates the property as commercial and parkland. The parkland designation on the subject property relates to an east-west strip near the northern third of the property. The parkland along the side launch basin and dry dock are already in the ownership of the town. Schedule F identifies the property as inside the built boundary and as designated available lands and within the Collingwood intensification area. Permitted uses in the commercial designation are to be in accordance with those permitted in the downtown core, which includes a range of commercial uses and residential apartments. The commercial designation at the north end of the site currently only permits a restaurant. Next slide, please. The proposed official plan amendment proposes to redesignate the subject property within the shipyards, 1, from commercial to a new mixed-use exception 2 to permit a mixed-use development, and secondly, from commercial to parkland to reconfigure the waterfront promenade around the north end of the site. Also proposed is to redesignate the subject property within the shipyards from parkland to mixed-use exception 2. This would apply to the current east-west promenade connection on the site in relation to reconfiguration of the promenade around the north end of the site adjacent to the harbor. Next slide, please. So you may be asking, what does all that look like visually? So this slide shows the existing official plan designations for the shipyards on the right and the proposed designations on the left. So looking at the proposed image on the left, the purple indicates the commercial designation proposed to be the new mixed-use exception 2 designation. The red indicates the parkland designation, proposed to be the new mixed-use exception 2. And the green indicates commercial designation proposed to be parkland. You can see the existing waterfront promenade indicated with the dotted blue line. The orange dotted line indicates the future promenade route around the site adjacent to the harbor, out to the north end of the site where it's proposed to widen into a plaza and continue along the edge of the harbor. The plaza proposed in this prominent location, rather than a restaurant as currently permitted, would make this waterfront space accessible to the general public free of charge. The town could choose to program this space with food vendors, and the proposal does not preclude one or more restaurants from locating elsewhere on the site. Mixed-use exception 2 policies would include permissions for residential units on the ground floor except along the side launchway frontage, requiring a minimum of 300 square meters of ground floor commercial space, and permitting a maximum of 101 residential dwelling units on the subject property. Next slide, please. With regard to the zoning, the Town of Collingwood zoning bylaw 2010-040 as amended zones the property as deferred commercial DC and recreation exception 5 or Rec 5. The Rec 5 zone is associated with the waterfront promenade and the future plaza to the southwest. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning bylaw amendment would, 1, create a new Holding 23 Downtown Core Commercial Exception 11 zone classification, or H23C1-11. Secondly, rezone the majority of the subject lands to the new Holding 23 Downtown Core Commercial Exception 11 zone. And thirdly, reconfigure parkland for the waterfront promenade around the perimeter of the site by rezoning the deferred commercial DC zoned lands at the northern end of the subject lands to Recreation Exception 5 or Rec 5 zone, and rezoning a smaller portion of land from Rec 5 to the new Holding 23 C1-11 zone. Next slide, please. So again, you may be asking, what does this look like? So at right, you can see the existing zoning on the property with DC across most of the site and Rec 5 as the small east-west strip. At left is the proposed zoning, which would implement the proposed official plan amendment with the new Downtown Core Commercial Exception 11 zone, with the Holding 23 provision across most of the property, and the northern end of the site adjacent to the harbor proposed as Rec 5. Holding 23 would require reconfiguration and commitment of water and wastewater servicing capacity allocation to the satisfaction of the town and execution of a site plan agreement and technical matters to the satisfaction of the town. Provisions for the Downtown Core Exception 11 zone include permissions for ground floor residential units, except alongside Launchway, establishing a maximum building height to implement the 6-story development with varied building massing, permit a maximum front yard setback of 31 meters to ensure the building addresses side Launchway, require a minimum vehicular entrance width of 4.4 meters to implement one-way entrances, establish a maximum elevation for the top of the underground parking garage at 179.65 meters Canadian geodetic datum, and limit the C1 commercial uses on the site by removing otherwise permitted C1 uses, such as a laundromat or others similar to that, to ensure that the commercial uses that are permitted on the site animate the adjacent public spaces and side Launchway. Next slide, please. So the effect of the proposed concurrent official plan and zoning bylaw amendments is to facilitate the development of a 6-story mixed-use residential commercial building and reconfigure parkland for the waterfront promenade around the perimeter of the site adjacent to the harbor. These applications would represent the establishment of the principle of development, and if committee and council agrees with the proposed uses and general configuration, the details would come through site plan control, and the holding provision specifically would preclude availability of a building permit until capacity is allocated and a site plan agreement is executed. Slide, please. In terms of public comments, none were provided at the public meeting. However, 3 written comments were provided, and they were in relation to height, promenade continuation, and high water levels. These concerns and how they've been addressed are outlined in further detail in the staff report, but I would note the architectural rendering on the screen, which shows the varied massing of the building, that's 6 stories overall, as well as the diagrams on the right-hand side that show the existing and proposed promenade route. So you can see that the route that is proposed is indeed continuous around the site. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the various studies and reports that were submitted in support of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications and have been extensively reviewed by the applicable town departments and external commenting agencies and third-party reviewers. Next slide, please. With regard to planning analysis, the proposed development is consistent and in conformity with all of the applicable provincial and municipal planning policy and regulatory instruments, including the provincial policy statement, A Place to Grow, Simcoe County's official plan, and the town's official plan. The proposal represents infill of a vacant lot in a prominent waterfront location. If approved, the proposal will result in more commercial space in the shipyards above the minimum currently set for the commercial lands in the official plan, ensures a continuous waterfront promenade and provides commercial uses on site adjacent to Side Launch Way, expands housing options, and the subject applications were circulated to town departments, applicable third-party peer reviewers, and external commenting agencies for review and comment, and all matters have been satisfactorily addressed. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps in the process, we're currently at step 7, where committee is considering a staff report, including recommendations for approval. It's anticipated that council will consider and make a decision to approve or refuse the zoning bylaw amendment and adopt or refuse the official plan amendment at its meeting scheduled for February 27th, 2023. Following council's decision, if adopted, the official plan amendment would be submitted to the County of Simcoe for consideration and approval. It is noted that concurrent zoning bylaw amendment, if adopted, would not come into force and effect until such time as the official plan amendment is approved by the county. Following the decision of the respective town and county councils, notice of passing or refusal will be circulated to all individuals and organizations who have requested notice. This notice will be posted in the local newspaper. After the decisions, there are appeal periods should anyone wish to appeal a decision of either the town or county to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If the amendments are passed by the respective councils and no appeals are received within the appeal period, then the amending zoning bylaw and official plan amendments would come into effect. Next slide, please. Should official plan and zoning bylaw amendments be approved, the proposed development is still subject to site plan control, and further technical review of the development will be undertaken through that process. Next slide, please. Lastly, in conclusion, staff are recommending adoption of the official plan amendment and passing of the zoning bylaw amendment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next step here is to open this up to the public. Would there be anyone in the audience this evening who wishes to speak to this matter? Yes, please come forward. Please start with your name and address. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor, councillors. Let me just open a note here. My name is Bob Eckert, and I own a unit on One Shipyard Lane, facing the launch basin. I've been in that unit since 2016. I've reviewed the zoning amendment for the Quay, and it's caught my interest, specifically because I face the launch basin, the east side of the launch basin. So I've reviewed the reference documents, and just like to compliment the staff on a good review. My concern with the development on the Quay is with the condition of the concrete retaining wall of the east side of the launch basin. Over the time that I've been able to witness the erosion of that concrete, I've wondered what would happen with new construction. So in review of the reference reports, one of the reports that was done is a design basin report in 2008, which looks at the condition of the launch basin, but focuses mainly on the west side, and very little, if anything, has been done on the review of the east side of that launch basin. So my concern would be that this project would move ahead on the basis of that design report without adequate review of the east side of the concrete reinforcement wall on the east side of that launch basin. So that would be my concern, and would hope that staff would update that design report so that the east side is considered, because I believe it's corroded or eroded significantly due to the weather.
And this is the site, if I can just clarify, where this new building would be built.
Correct. Correct.
Director Slummock, could you comment on that at all at this meeting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'm not familiar with that area, but we will look into it.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Good evening.
Evening, Mayor Hamlin, members of council and staff and public. My name is Bennett McNeil. I'm a development manager with FRAM. And so I guess I'll be brief because Justin did a great job summarizing everything. I just wanted to say how excited we are to be here tonight, as this is the last phase by FRAM for the shipyard's development and what we consider one of the most important blocks as it connects the downtown to the waterfront and will serve as a public destination for years to come. So recognizing that significance, one of the major improvements from the as of right policy is the parkland reconfiguration. We'll be extending the waterfront public park and providing a continuous waterfront boardwalk around the entire site perimeter. And this is achieved by providing an additional overdedication of parkland at the northern tip of the site. At the same time, we also hope to create a local gathering place at the southwest corner, framing out the public piazza with commercial space. And a lot of thought, I just want to reiterate, a lot of thought and attention to detail has gone into creating this cohesive project that integrates with and enhances the pedestrian realm, increases the public access and enjoyment of the waterfront, and still remains functional from an operational standpoint. And to reiterate, the proposal is not asking for more height or density. It is rather to bring the current deferred zoning into alignment with the proposed development. And as Justin mentioned, we have submitted a site plan application just recently. And from a building design, urban design standpoint, it matches exactly what you see in front of you today. So happy to answer and address any questions or comments. And I can actually address the first comment question.
Sure, why don't you while you're here?
Yeah,
Thank you.
as part of the process and as part of the original master development agreement that was done 20 years ago, we've agreed to reconstruct the shoreline wall in its entirety. And as part of that, we've undertaken a separate process for that. So we've made a submission working with town staff and engineering, as well as the MVCA and Tatham as a peer reviewer for the town to fully reconstruct that shore wall. So those concerns will be addressed prior to the development of our block. It's actually a condition of permit as well to have the wall in place.
Good, thank you very much. Would there be any other members of the public who would like to speak to this evening? And Deputy Clerk, would there be any online?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have some attendees with us remotely today. If there's anyone wishing to speak to the staff report, if you can please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And there's no one wishing to speak to this report at the time.
Okay, I'll read in the motion that staff report P 2023-03 proposed concurrent official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, Collingwood Quay lands dated February 13, 2023 be received, and that official plan amendment number 47 attached as Appendix A be adopted and submitted to the County of Simcoe for approval, and that an amending zoning bylaw attached as Appendix B be enacted and passed. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Baines. And would there be any questions or comments on this? Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Community Planner Treacle, I assume. I'm a little confused about the Rec 5, what appears to be an east-west corridor. I'm assuming between the two sections of the buildings. Will that be a public corridor, or is that merely for the tenants who are renting in the building?
Yeah, go ahead, Community Planner Teagle.
Thank you. So through the chair, I don't know if Robin's able to bring that slide back at all that shows the official plan amendment. So slide 7 might be particularly helpful. But the existing official plan and zoning on the property has a 5-meter wide parkland strip and that is intended, as the policies exist right now, for a easement for public purposes of continuation of the promenade between what would have been a standalone restaurant at the north tip of the subject site, and then whatever building massing was then proposed on the commercial portion to the south. What is being proposed through these amendments is for the promenade to continue around the exterior, the perimeter of the site adjacent to the water's edge for the entirety of the promenade. So there will no longer be a connection through the middle of the site east-west. The east-west connection will occur at the north end.
Thank you for that. So then why then do you show that, essentially that corridor there, if it's not essentially a public corridor, that east-west and that picture?
Go ahead.
So through the chair, so that just simply highlights that there's a different existing official plan designation and zoning on that particular strip in relation to the existing contemplated easement there, and that through these policies, that strip is going to be redesignated. It's simply just a different color to indicate that it's a different designation and zone that's being changed.
Thank you. No more questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you very much, Mayor Hamlin. So I love the proposal and I'm in agreement with staff's recommendation. My question probably way too far ahead, but to put it on the radar, I know that the pressure of construction parking has had on the medical building in that area. And I'm wondering in the plans going ahead, if we can plan for either off-site parking where it's appropriate or those kinds of things going forward, because under other business, I'm going to ask if there's anything we can do currently with the ongoing construction, which is impacting the medical building. But it's such a tight space down there when you bring in the outside parking for the specialized construction, which we need. But I'm sure there's some parking that can be done away so that people can still park for the medical building there. So that's all. No, I love it. Been happy to support it.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Ring.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hamlin. In one of the slides here, it mentions expands housing options, and I'm sure I know the answer to that. That is, everything down there is going to be for sale, right? That doesn't mean different levels of ownership or rentals or whatever.
Community Planner Tico?
So through the chair, they will be apartment dwelling units, but in a condominium ownership format.
Any other questions? Councillor Doherty?
Thank you. I have two concerns and actually one disagreement with the zoning. And that is with regard to the deletion of the restaurant as a permitted use on the north end of the quay. I believe that the rationale that's been offered here, that there's not sufficient commercial opportunity or viability is very ill-conceived. The amount of population that we currently have at the waterfront, plus what we will be adding with this building, 31 Huron, Perfect World, plus the redevelopment of the terminals, there is going to be a massive residential component and a captive audience for such a service on the waterfront. The other concern that I have is that if you speak to residents or to visitors, the number one amenity that seems to be missing right now is a waterfront restaurant. And by deleting that restaurant opportunity from the harbor per se is a loss for the community from a commercial standpoint. The next thing that I will say is that I think that just generally with regard to how commercial is being built out, the current commercial that we have at the waterfront, so meaning the town, where Rexall is, that building, is not effective animation of the waterfront. It is not a sufficient draw for traffic. It certainly is not a sufficient draw for tourism, for absolutely sure. So I think that we need to be very careful as to the kind of commercial that we are intending to attract, where we are creating commercial space on the waterfront. Otherwise, it's going to be, in my view, a dead failure. And just generally, I'm just going to make this observation that it seems to me that our waterfront animation opportunities are secondary to private access and enjoyment of the waterfront. And I think as we continue to build out the waterfront, we need to be very cognizant of that fact. The waterfront master plan envisioned complete, well-rounded enjoyment for all of the waterfront. And this configuration of this building right now, I think, fails to achieve that in its entirety. The second comment I will make is with regard to the parking, and it's just a small comment. But I think that the provision of parking spaces that are in excess of what would be required does not fit with the notion that development is pedestrian or public transit oriented. And it certainly does not help to contribute to GHG reduction by encouraging more vehicles at the waterfront. And I'm just not sure why that would have been done. Certainly, there's no, as the planner has reminded me, there's no ability for us to tell a developer to reduce the amount of parking, but perhaps that there might be an opportunity with those additional spaces to convert them to something that would be more generally to the enjoyment of the facility, either for the owners or for the public. So it's not to say that I don't agree or support the rest of the development, but these are concerns, and I think that we need to start thinking about this now as we finish this shipyard's development to make sure that we build out what our waterfront master plan first conceived. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And I support the staff recommendation. I'm pleased about the extension of the promenade public walkway to now skirt right around the shoreline to the very north of the property and then back down. My question actually is about the Perfect World property, because the one chart shows us as the walkway coming around and then heading heading east and then hitting the border of Perfect World. So my question is, will there, on the Perfect World property, and I don't know if this is something that can be answered or not, will it have the promenade proceed up the west side of the property and then across the north end of the property so that it connects with Heritage Drive, so that there be a promenade walkway all the way along the shoreline of the harbor?
Staff able to address that question this evening?
Yes. So through
go
the
ahead.
chair, currently the zoning and official plan designation on the Perfect World property doesn't include a strip of parkland like it does around the Collingwood Quay site. So it's, I would anticipate that it would be certainly a benefit to that property for them to provide the promenade along the water's edge, and that may be something that's worked out through site plan. But it ended there, noting that that's the end of the strip of land adjacent to the water that is in public ownership, and at that point it may continue in terms of the public's route as of right downside Launchway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a couple. The first one is perhaps quite small, but because I've sitting on council for 5 winters, and this is the 5th year in a row that residents have come forward and asked why we can't plow as a town the promenade on the west side of the basin? And the answer has been from our staff that it hasn't been designed well enough or wide enough to allow equipment. So my first question, is the strip proposed to go around this property as the promenade been designed to accommodate snow plowing equipment? And if, yeah, go ahead. Or could it be? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I can take a stab at the first answer for this question. So currently the promenade that is proposed is a 10-meter wide promenade. During the technical reviews to date, we have looked at a construction that would support vehicles and turning movements of a vehicle. I think to consider snow removal around the promenade, we need to also look at some environmental considerations. And then this also becomes a level of service. So, you know, we do need to, if we're going to consider snow removal on this promenade or any additional areas anywhere else, right, there would need to be that commitment, you know, from council to increase that level of service to our community and support the resources needed behind that.
Okay, so just as a follow-up, if I could, I totally understand we'd have to allocate budget funds to actually do the snow plowing. But during the site plan process, would this be something that could be looked at to make sure if a future council, or even perhaps even this one, was to decide to fund the removal of snow, that there's enough room for it to be accommodated?
Yes, Madam Chair. So engineering can take a look at it through the technical review. For the environmental aspect, it's my understanding we'd need to look at some, you know, quality control. And so we need to have a better understanding of what that would mean and what we would be asking from the developer from that perspective.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. My second comment, you know, really I was going to say almost exactly what Councillor Doherty said. So you would have thought we almost talked about it, but there wasn't time. And really my concern is, as I understand it, this shipyard's area was developed to be a mixed-use area with commercial and residential uses. And the plans reflected that. But over time, this developer has come forward bit by bit to amend each of the phases. So you remember there was supposed to be live work on the side launch way, so that was removed to be just residential. And I believe there was going to be commercial on the west side of the basin there, where the condo building turned into townhomes. So the commercial was lost there. So what we have so far is just commercial, or just residential, I should say. And so now we have the last piece. And so that building, as Councillor Doherty mentioned, it was so important to our community not just to have a retail or commercial space at the north end of that property, but it was actually stipulated in the planning documents that it be a restaurant, right? That's pretty unusual because this was so important to the community to allow, to ensure we get some of that back and forth happening between the downtown and the waterfront, and to animate, I love the word you used, to animate the waterfront. So it's just not one or the other. So I was so disappointed to see this come forward with the elimination of the restaurant at the front with a retail feasibility study that really, in my view, didn't address what the issue was, and in fact assumed all kinds of facts, and I won't go over it, but that were incorrect. I confirmed with our planning director today. So it did strike me that perhaps, I would take this tonight by asking council if they would consider referring this back to our staff to get a peer review of the retail feasibility study. In other words, should there be some retail down there? Because they're asking for a very limited amount of retail, 3,000 square feet, just a tiny portion of the ground floor of that residential building, and then a sort of a separate pod that might be connected by a roof to the residential building fronting onto Side Launch Way, sort of at the back end of things, a little retail space. So I don't know if that's good space or bad space. Honestly, I just can observe that it's not what had originally been planned here. So I would just like us to have our own information. Is this right? Is this, all that can be supported in that location? And can a restaurant not be, are they right? A restaurant will never work there, because this was a founding principle, as far as I'm concerned, for our waterfront master plan, having a restaurant on the waterfront. So I will not be supporting that we approve this tonight, but rather that it be sent back to staff for a peer review of the retail feasibility study. Okay, so any comments on my big words? No. Okay, so yes, Councillor Ring.
I can't say I disagree with what you're saying. I'm just wondering, during the presentation, it was mentioned that most of the parking would be underground. And I agree with Councillor Doherty that we should try to cut down the greenhouse gas effects as much as we can, but we know that we're going to have parking. People aren't always going to walk down there. I don't know where we're going to park even just for day trips down there, let alone a lot of commercial, because the underground parking will be for residents, I'm assuming, and not the public. Am I correct there?
Committee Planner Teagle, do you have a breakdown?
So through the chair, my understanding is the majority of the underground parking is to be for the residential units, and that the surface parking is intended for the commercial uses on site. And the applicant can confirm that if they would like to say differently.
Yeah, that is correct. There is an oversupply of surface parking, again, to address some of that commercial need, because there is a lot of people coming to the downtown without places to park, as seen by all the on-street parking through Side Launch Way today. If I can I address some of the previous comments?
No,
pertaining
not
to
at
the
this
approval?
point, but thank you. Did you have any further comments about
Yeah,
the parking?
just on that, and a comment was made by Councillor Jeffries that they hope during the construction phase that we find a way to park vehicles down there. I walk that area almost every day, and it's been a parking problem already without anything built there, and that was long before they started the construction where they are now. That street, Side Launch Way for right to Birch Street from Heritage, is lined with cars both sides of the road, and because there is no parking down there, you can't get into the. If I want to go to the BMO, I don't know where you park unless you kind of sit there and wait for somebody to move, because there's not enough parking to even go to the bank, let alone more commercial down in that area. I'd like to see it because I think we need it. I'm just wondering if there's any way we can rectify parking problems in that area.
So are you suggesting that if this matter is to go back to staff, they also consider whether additional parking could be provided?
Well, I personally think we need it. I mean, if it's not a big deal to look into it.
Director Valentine, you have something to say on parking. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the councillor, just to confirm that a construction management plan will be required through the site plan control process, and that would include construction access and parking that would need to be addressed. So that is a matter that is already contemplated to be addressed through the site plan application, where we will look at the details of development.
Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I grew up in Toronto and benefited from the vision in Harbourfront, most particularly the terminal buildings there and power plant. And much of what that brought, I think, to revitalizing the waterfront. And it's particularly in that regard that I look at this and think, if it proceeds as it is now, I'm not sure how you look at our citizens and say, we got you something out of this, your birthright to a certain extent of the harbor and access to it. This promenade's very nice. The kiosk that the public plaza which would be great as well. But really, to really do a thorough study about the potential of a restaurant, guys, personally, having eaten again down at Harborfront a lot in a lot of different restaurants, I think this would be a perfect place for a restaurant. But I'm not sure what the industry would say in the dead of winter. I don't find it that big a deal, but I would like to see the report, so I would support your referral back to staff in this regard.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. This question, I guess, would be through you to Director Valentine. Short of a referral back to staff for a peer review, is there an opportunity, because we don't have the final site plan control, for the proponent to make changes to the proposed configuration if they...
Go ahead, Director Valentine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the councillor. So just a few matters of clarification. The zoning that's proposed on the property would not preclude a restaurant. In fact, it would permit a restaurant anywhere on the property. What the zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment do accomplish is the specific location at that northern point would no longer be required. So just to confirm that. And certainly, you know, staff did look very carefully at this issue and conducted internal circulations with our economic development folks as well with respect to the restaurant. And we really also struggled with what is true public access. Is a restaurant true public access where I may be able to afford it, but another member of our community couldn't? And instead we have a full public access and a widened piazza, I believe perhaps is the right term, at the tip now that could accommodate food trucks, events, etc., that would be available for all members of the public, not just those who could afford to go to a restaurant. So those were some of the staff considerations. With respect to the configuration, Councillor Doherty, yes, that could be addressed through site plan control, but do be aware that the zoning bylaw does not compel a restaurant, it allows a restaurant. So we could not compel through site plan control that a restaurant be developed on the property under these amendments.
Councillor Doherty, you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. And my question is very specific to putting the restaurant back at the north end of the facility. So what this zoning bylaw amendment is saying that we would be removing that opportunity from that place. I understand that a restaurant may be permitted elsewhere, but in my view, this is the prime location for a restaurant as it was envisioned in the Waterfront Master Plan.
Thank you. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin, and I continue to support the staff recommendation. My question, again, has to do with Perfect World. I believe there's a restaurant ability for them on that property. I guess through you to Director Valentine.
Through the chair, my understanding is that the Perfect World property includes, the zoning would include permissions for a restaurant. Again, I'm not sure though that it's required that they have a restaurant, but they could certainly have one with the existing zoning.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to follow up on the comment about the semi-public use of a restaurant, because certainly if I just refer to Councillor Bain's comments about the particular project he's talking about in Toronto, they do have restaurants at the ground level, at the water level, and there's also a promenade, if you want to call it. The public can walk outside the restaurant and walk around and look out into the bay, and I don't see them as mutually exclusive items, just from my own perspective. Okay, so we have the motion on the floor, and I guess I would like to amend the motion so that the official plan and zoning bylaw are referred back to staff specifically for a peer review of the retail feasibility study. I don't know if there'd be a seconder for that. Councillor Doherty, any discussion or comments? Okay.
Move the chair to make that.
Oh, yes, thank you. Deputy Mayor, can you please take this on for me?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And I believe you've outlined the amendment. So do you have a seconder for the amendment?
Yes.
Was it Councillor Doherty? Any discussion of the amendment? Councillor Ring.
Just to make sure, the feasibility study of the commercial area, is that what you're saying, or just the restaurant, or?
Well, that's a good question. In particular, the restaurant.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, not supporting it, whether feasibility study is going to bring anything anyways, other than they say that you can have a restaurant, but the zoning bylaw changes will permit that anyways, right?
It will, as what's before us, it would remove the requirement for a restaurant at the end of that property. And staff has indicated a restaurant could go there, but I would say the fact that the owners asked for permission to remove the requirement could be indicative of their thinking on this topic. Because I think there might be some who say that that's the most valuable part for a residential development is the north end. But I'm not here to speculate on that. So I think what I
Excuse me.
Yes,
Oh,
yes, go
okay.
ahead.
So does that answer your question, or do you want to direct one to staff, or?
No, I think I know the answer, and if staff's got more to add to it, I would certainly like to listen.
I'll look to Director Valentine in case there's anything you want to add to that part of the discussion. You may not, but I'm just checking to see.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think Council's understanding is correct that to compel a restaurant at the north end is what would be removed through these amendments. And there was a retail feasibility study undertaken to justify that position. It was reviewed by economic development staff who did not take a position on the restaurant in particular. So council could ask for a peer review, but again, the zoning on the property does not preclude a restaurant, but it does not also specifically compel the applicant to develop one at the north end as originally intended.
Thank you. Follow up?
One quick follow-up. And I think in the presentation it was also mentioned that they won't be compelled to the restaurant at the north end, but possibly could add a restaurant somewhere else on the location. There could be more than one restaurant. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak to it? So we have an amendment on the floor. I will call then all those in support of the amendment. 1, 2, 3, 4, and all opposed? 3. So that carries.
Okay, so
back?
thank you very much. And thanks for the reminder. That was just the amendment we voted on.
Sorry, a referral isn't really an amendment. A referral is a direction. So
Okay.
it shouldn't have been classified as an amendment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, 7.3, this is the 120 Mountain Road site plan approval. Who would be making the staff report presentation on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, we'll just, if it's okay with committee, just have Community Planner Tico move into his presentation for this one.
Thank you.
All right. So this is a presentation regarding site plan control for 120 Mountain Road. Come up and go to the second slide, please, Robin. So this is a 2022 aerial photograph of the subject lands, which are located on the south side of Mountain Road and municipally addressed as 120 Mountain Road. The property is rectangular in shape and is approximately 4 hectares or a little over 10 acres in size, with 142 meters of frontage along Mountain Road, and is currently vacant and mostly vegetated. Surrounding land uses include environmental protection lands with the Black Ash Creek and Taylor Creek trails abutting the subject property to the south, vacant industrial park lands and the Georgian Bay Biomed site and Ignora/Side Launch Brewing beyond to the west, developed lands with a variety of light industrial uses to the east, and vacant industrial park lands which previously contained the Goodyear factory to the north. Next slide, please. Back to slide. Oh, sorry, this one's not in my presentation. So in terms of the official plan and zoning, the site is currently designated industrial park in the official plan and is zoned by Collingwood zoning bylaw 2010-040 as amended as industrial park M5. Next slide, please. In terms of the file history, so the pre-consultation meeting for the development proposal occurred in November 2012. A formal site plan control application submission was first made in December 2014 that never advanced to council for a decision. The current application was filed in November of 2019. In terms of water capacity allocation, the entire proposal will require in the future 83.5 SDUs of water and 63.8 SDUs of wastewater. Next slide, please. So this is an overall site plan for the subject property. So Mountain Road is at the right. The proposed development consists of 30 industrial units in 4 one-story buildings with optional mezzanines. In the southeast or lower left corner of the screen, a constructed wetland/stormwater management pond is proposed. The constructed wetland is part of the compensation agreement with the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, or NVCA, for the existing wetland that's on the site. Adjacent to the constructed wetland, a connection across the site is proposed in terms of a trail from Mountain Road through to the Taylor Creek Trail to the south. Continuous and barrier-free pedestrian connections are proposed to connect the buildings on site with each other, Mountain Road, and the trail network, and 2 outdoor amenity areas are proposed on site adjacent to Building A. The southwest corner of the site, or the top left of the screen, adjacent to the Taylor Creek Trail, is proposed to remain in its current vegetated state. Surface parking, including accessible parking spaces, are distributed throughout the site to serve each building and is clearly delineated with various landscaped areas. Next slide, please. So this is an architectural rendering of Building A facing Mountain Road. You can see that there's no visible parking here, so the parking is located behind that building, so that Mountain Road is addressed by the building facade and landscaping to create an attractive streetscape. Building A is also taller than the other proposed buildings on site to provide a more suitable presence for an arterial street in accordance with the guidance of the Urban Design Manual. Next slide, please. So to provide a better sense of what the proposal will look like once constructed, the next few slides provide some architectural elevations of the proposed development. This is Building A again at the front of the site, adjacent to Mountain Road. So the front elevation is the most colorful one at the top, the rear at the bottom rather, and then the 2 side elevations are in the middle. Next slide, please. This is the elevation for buildings B and C, so they're the same. So those are the 2 buildings in the middle of the site. Again, the front elevations for those, but facing essentially the side lot lines is the elevation at the top and the rear at the bottom, and then the sides in the middle again. Slide, please. And lastly, this is Building D at the rear of the subject property. So again, the front of the building's at the top, rear at the bottom, sides in between. Next slide, please. This is an excerpt of the landscaping plans. So at the top, you can see the plantings along Mountain Road at the right, plantings throughout the parking areas, and the vegetated area to remain shown at the top left. And the excerpt on the bottom shows the landscape plan for the constructed wetland, and then with an extensive array of plantings and deciduous tree plantings proposed along the trail connection adjacent to the constructed wetland or stormwater management pond. Next slide, please. So this slide illustrates the various studies and reports that were submitted in support of the application that have been extensively reviewed by applicable town departments and external commenting agencies and third-party peer reviewers. Specifically with regard for the need for these kinds of units, economic development staff provided some points here. So the vacancy rate for industrial units in healthy economies generally between 5 and 8% at a given time. Collingwood is about 0 or below 5% for several years, mostly due to a lack of existing stock. And demand for small to medium-sized industrial has been consistent, with anecdotal evidence of potential tenants seeking spaces for months or years at a time due to the lack of vacancy or properly zoned space. Simcoe County as a whole lacks existing stock of industrial space, leading to difficulties landing potential tenants and investment attraction. And this development will add over 100,000 square feet of gross floor area to Collingwood, with an average across the 30 units of 3,500 square feet that is consistent with the demand that is being sought. And the M5 zoning on the site provides a strong mix of potential business opportunities. Next slide, please. So in terms of planning analysis and outcomes, the proposed development is consistent and in conformity with all of the applicable provincial and municipal planning policies and regulatory instruments as outlined in the staff report. The property is appropriately zoned for the proposed development and represents infill of a vacant lot with within the existing built boundary of the town. If approved, it would contribute towards achieving a complete community that will facilitate additional employment opportunities with the introduction of more industrial space. The subject application was also circulated to town departments and third-party peer reviewers and external agencies for review, comment, and all matters have been satisfactorily addressed. Next slide, please. So the site plan control agreement will include all the standard clauses typically found in the town's site plan control agreements. There's a number of special terms and conditions that are currently being refined by staff and the town solicitor in a draft form. Once site plan control agreement has been finalized to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, Building and Economic Development and the town solicitor, and once we have servicing capacity allocation granted for the development, then the mayor and clerk would execute the agreement. Financial and security considerations in the site plan agreement include the legal deposit, the engineering services review fee, securities, and cash in lieu of parkland at a rate of 2% of the appraised value of the lands. And that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I can see there are no members of the public in the audience who wish to speak to this, but Deputy Clerk, would there be anyone online?
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. There is one participant still with us remotely. If you'd like to speak to the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And this individual doesn't wish to speak to this report at this time.
Thank you. I'll read in the motion. The staff report P 2023-04, approval and authorization bylaw to execute a site plan control agreement for 120 Mountain Road, which is a multi-unit industrial development dated February 13, 2023, be received. And further, that site plan application number D11819 be approved subject to the following conditions. 1, confirmation of a municipal servicing capacity allocation. And 2, execution of a site plan control agreement with the town of Collingwood to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, Building, Economic Development, and the town solicitor. And further, that an authorization bylaw to execute the site plan control agreement for a multi-unit industrial development at 120 Mountain Road be enacted and passed. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ring, Councillor Potts. Would there be any comments or questions? Councillor Baines.
I'm fully in support of this. I just have one question for Community Planner Tico. I assume that the stormwater pond will have to be fenced, and if so, would that be MVCA's requirement?
I'm not aware of any requirement that needs to be fenced as it's presently proposed. The site is fenced along the eastern and southern and western lot lines, but the pond itself is not does not have a perimeter fence around it.
Delighted to hear that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I just want to say I'm so excited to see this come forward. It's been a long time, and it should be an incredibly wonderful addition for our offerings for those who wish to set up business in our town. And also, I'm so pleased to see the connection for the trail through the site. That's a real win for the community. Okay, with all that, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll just take a 10-minute break now, and then we'll return. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. The next item on our agenda is 7.4. This is PW 2023-01, Water Compliance Report. Who would be making, that would be Director Slema making the report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just do a very brief introduction, and then Manager McGinnity is here to go through the presentation for committee this evening. So the annual water compliance report is a requirement under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and it is required to be presented and approved by council before the end of the month of February annually. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Manager McGinnity.
Thank you. Go ahead, Manager McGinnity. Okay. Okay, Manager McGinnity, I think we're ready now for you if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. So sorry, let me just get my screen set up here. So tonight we're going to be presenting the 2022 Water Compliance Report. If you could please advance the slide. So the annual water compliance report is prepared each year to satisfy two different annual reporting requirements under the Safe Drinking Water Act. The report we are presenting to committee today covers the 2022 calendar year and must be submitted to the MECP and posted on the town's website no later than February 28th. The following slides are some highlights from the report. Next slide. The town invested over $7 million in our water system in 2022, with a significant portion of these costs being allocated to the UV system upgrades at the water treatment plant, the design of the water treatment plant expansion, and the replacement of aging membrane filters. Other notable projects include the SCADA system upgrades, which are currently being implemented, the bulk water system replacement at Davie Reservoir, and some valve and water main replacements around town. Next slide. There were no incidents of adverse drinking water tests again this year. In 2022, we did have two adverse events of low chlorine residual in the distribution system. We created an action item that resulted in the purchase of seasonal auto flushers that have prevented a recurrence. Next slide. Extensive sampling at both the water treatment plant and within the water distribution system is required to demonstrate compliance with the Ontario Drinking Water Quality Standards and other Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. The chemical and bacteriological samples from 2022 demonstrate that all parameters are well within the required limits, and most results showed no detection of any of these parameters. Next slide. The Safe Drinking Water Act also requires that we continuously monitor chlorine residual in the treated water and at Davie Reservoir, the Tower, and Carmichael reservoirs. We also took a total of 1,286 grab samples at various locations in the distribution system. While there were some instances of high instantaneous chlorine concentrations at both the Tower and Davie Reservoir, there were no non-compliance or adverse results this year. Next slide. In the distribution system, we also monitor for trihalomethanes and haloacetic acids, or THMs and HAAs. These are disinfection byproducts that are created when chlorine reacts with the organics in the water. We are seeing a slightly rising trend of THMs, but in 2022, those levels declined again, while the HAAs are slightly increasing, but not above historical levels. Both THM and HAA concentrations are well below the maximum acceptable concentration and therefore not a concern at this time. Next slide. As part of the membrane cleaning process at the water treatment plant, partially treated water is pushed back through the membranes to clear sediment that may be accumulating in them. This backwash water can be discharged either into the sanitary sewer or directly into the lake. Due to limitations with the existing sanitary infrastructure at the site, we are required to discharge some of this water to the lake. An amendment to the town's municipal drinking water license in 2021 required that the town monitor the quality of these discharges to the lake and meet a running annual average chlorine concentration of 0.02 milligrams per liter. Since the water treatment plant does not currently have the capability to dechlorinate the discharges, the water being discharged to the lake often exceeds this limit. While staff have implemented measures such as manual zebra mussel removal to try to reduce the chlorine concentrations in these discharges, there continue to be exceedances of this limit. These exceedances are communicated to the ministry monthly, and they have accepted the remedial action outlined by the town, which includes adding dechlorination capabilities as part of the water treatment plant expansion. Next slide. A Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Park annual inspection was completed in August 2022. Based on the ministry established risk rating methodology, the Collingwood drinking water system received a 98.31% rating for 2022. This is the highest rating we are currently able to achieve due to the challenges with discharging the chlorinated water to the lake from the membrane cleaning process. It's important to note that this noncompliance does not relate to the supply or distribution of potable water. Next slide. The capacity of our water treatment system is set in the municipal drinking water license and is based on the ability of the treatment plant to meet all the disinfection requirements. Our maximum day production, the day with the highest usage for the year, was at 80% of our rated treatment plant capacity. That's down approximately 1% from last year, but within the range of what we've observed as the maximum day demand over the past few years. Staff are working on the design of the water treatment plant expansion to ensure we have sufficient capacity to support continued growth in town as the remaining treatment capacity of the plant moves closer to its full rated capacity. Staff are in the process of reviewing and updating the remaining uncommitted hydraulic reserve capacity calculations for the water treatment plant and expect to present this information to Council in March. Next slide. So in conclusion, the town of Collingwood continues to provide safe, reliable, potable water to our customers and continues to meet our legislative requirements. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on the report at this time.
Thank you for your report. Would there be any members of the public online who might wish to address this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We currently do not have any participants on a line at the moment.
Okay, I'll read in the motion and then we'll open this for questions and discussion. That staff report PW 2023-01 be received and that the report be considered at the February 21, 2023 council meeting to ensure the legislative deadline specified in OREG 170/03 drinking water systems will be met, and that council directs staff to post the 2022 annual water compliance report on the town's website no later than February 28, 2023. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Fryer and Councillor Doherty. Any questions of Manager McGinty or any comments? Yes, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. And I sent some questions in earlier and Manager McGinty's was good enough to respond to those. One of them was in regards to, my second question was about the notice in the item 14 about some of the water that's discharged goes to the sanitary sewer and some goes to the bay directly. So I wondered if I could get a little more of an explanation in regards to that situation. It's explained in the answer that there will be some treatment facilities with the upgrade of the water treatment plant. I'm just trying to understand if some of the discharge can go directly to the bay, I'm wondering why there needs to be treatment, I guess would be one question I would have through you.
Okay, thank you. Can you answer that? Manager McGinty, go ahead.
Yes, Madam Chair, through you to Deputy Mayor Fryer. Sorry, I'm just curious why you're wondering if any discharges need to go to the sanitary sewer system, or if we should be discharging all of the processed water to process waste to the lake.
Yes, go
Just
ahead,
clarification
clarify,
then.
yeah.
I believe the wording in the report talks about some going to the sanitary sewer and some going directly to the bay. And because it's going directly to the bay, I wondered why we were going to be putting some sort of treatment process in place when the water treatment plant expansion went along.
Okay, I'm still not sure I've understood correctly, but I'll try my best. So in terms of treatment process to allow us to continue to discharge water to the lake, we'd be looking at dechlorination. So we are looking to add that in to allow us the ability to discharge the backwash water to the lake. However, we're also required to meet suspended solids concentrations. And we do obviously have some suspended solids present in the backwash water, as that's technically what we're removing from the membranes as part of the cleaning process. So we do have to be cognizant of that and make sure that we can achieve both the chlorine residual or chlorine concentrations as well as the suspended solid concentrations with what we're discharging back to the lake. And in terms of allowing us to continue to discharge the sanitary sewer, we also have citric acid used as part of our membrane wash processes. So we can't discharge that back to the lake. So that's one cleaning process water that we definitely need to discharge to the sanitary sewer. So we're looking at making sure we increase the capacity of the sanitary sewer and add a small pumping station at the water treatment plant as part of the upgrades to allow us to continue to have the option to discharge the sanitary sewer. And we would look at also discharging to the lake if our water quality meets those requirements.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up, and that's great on that particular part of it. The other area that I was having trouble, I was trying to do some matching of the charts, and Manager McGinty explained that industrial non-potable water is partly the reason why, when I was trying to look at the two charts, the raw and the produced water, I was having trouble matching up because there was large percentage changes and they weren't so to speak matching. So I just wanted to clarify and make sure that I understand this. Industrial isn't part of the MCEP requirement in regards to this report, so that's why it doesn't get in here. But we will see the industrial statistics in that when the operational yearly operational review is done, which I assume would come out fairly shortly as well. Through you.
Yes, go ahead, Manager.
So the industrial system, in terms of, I'm not sure what information you're looking for on the industrial system. Are you looking for a number of customers, the type of water, the amount of water that's being provided to them on an annual basis? Or just explain the discrepancy between the treated water production rates and the raw water taking? And
it's not so much a discrepancy, it's just that's the reason why it's different, is that we don't have industrial daily and maximum pumpage statistics in this report. So I was thinking that the operational review that's done annually would have that.
Through you, Madam Chair. So we don't typically, I'm trying to recall what we've reported on the industrial line specifically in the past. We tend to focus more on the potable system, but if council would like to have more specific information about the industrial supply, we can certainly look to provide that.
I can leave it with staff in that regard. I was just going to say that, as I said, I was trying to look at the charts and match up, because I've been trying to understand in regards to Collingwood's use and third-party use and the impacts of that, and it relates right back to what I feel is still some outstanding training that we need to have happen with our water. And the instructor, when we had the clean water training done, referred to the fact that sustainability, strategic financial plan, and those types of things was something that wasn't being covered in that session, but would be covered in a future session. So it, as I said, whenever something's coming forward, I always try to look at it and get a better understanding because of the circumstances that water's in right now. And I am hopeful that we'll see some further training in that regard as far as the strategic financial plan and how it sits with everything that's gone on with the ICBL and the requirements of the water treatment plant expansion.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll bring this to a vote then. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much for your hard work, and thank you. The next item on the agenda is 7.5. This is PW 2023-02, Mountain Croft Phase 5 and 6 Assumption. This would be Director Slama. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will speak and provide a summary to committee this evening on this report, but I would like to mention that I do have Acting Manager of Engineering Stuart West and our development technologist Sheldon Hancock on the line with us as well this evening. They have been the two staff members that have been working closely with the developer over the years, and they are here this evening and available to answer some questions on the report. So the report in front of you is for the assumption of the final phase of a 6-phase subdivision, Mountain Croft. We are pleased to bring forward a clear, straightforward assumption, which is a testament to a developer moving through the construction of their phase development in a timely manner. This is also a good news story with respect to how the developer worked with staff to address all of the conditions within the subdivision agreement. Staff have reviewed the condition of all the infrastructure assets that we are recommending assumption for this evening. So just to give a couple of examples, when we look at underground works like the sanitary and the storm sewer, the kind of work that happens but prior to assumption is flushing of the underground pipes, some camera work to see the condition, inspection of manholes, catch basins, that kind of thing. Same thing with the water system. Not as easy to assess the underground condition of the water system, but there is an inspection of the condition of the valves and the hydrants, make sure, and curb stops, making sure that they're all operable. A review of the sidewalks and the boulevard, and then of course the road. The final asphalt is applied, and assumption happens following the 2-year warranty period, which allows staff to look and see how the road is holding up, and if there's any issues with respect to settlements or cracks or anything with the curbs or signage, that can all be addressed through the deficiencies prior to staff bringing forward assumption. So we are here tonight. Staff are recommending assumption of this final phase. It also includes assumption of the stormwater pond. The stormwater pond was built in phase 1. But assumption is delayed, which allows for construction. When construction happens, any kind of construction debris or anything that might flow to the stormwater pond, one of the requirements in the subdivision agreement is that the pond needs to be cleaned out prior to assumption. So the pond has been cleaned out, and that gives staff confidence that the pond will function the way it was intended when designed. So that work is done, and with this final phase, we're also we're recommending assumption of the stormwater pond. And that's all I have for the summary. If there are any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you for that summary. Deputy Clerk, would there be anyone online who wishes to address council on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We don't currently have any attendees online.
Okay, I'll read in the motion now that staff report PW 2023-02 Mountain Croft subdivision assumption be received, and that council approve the assumption of all municipal works within Phase 6 and the stormwater management pond of the Mountain Croft subdivision, and that council enact and pass a bylaw to assume the roads in Phase 6 and the stormwater management pond within the Mountain Croft subdivision. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Potts, Deputy Mayor Fryer, any questions or comments? Seeing none? Oh, yes, go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very pleased to see a uncomplicated assumption of the public spaces on this development. I do have a question with regard to the stormwater pond, and that is to inquire whether this pond is fenced or not fenced.
Go ahead, Director Slama.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Doherty, this stormwater pond is fenced.
And why is that?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Doherty. So this stormwater pond is fenced for a couple of reasons. So one, the initial design of the pond considers sloping. There's sections where the slope is steep enough that we would recommend there is risk and liability associated with that. Difficult if there was an incident and someone fell into the pond, difficulties with rescue. Also in this case, this pond is completely surrounded by private property. So we do often recommend fencing when it's adjacent to residential properties. This allows us just to ensure that the town property is retained and we don't have any encroachments onto the property. And another element is that there's no really connectivity with this stormwater pond. So sometimes we'll look and we'll say, how are we connecting to a street access or trails, and what's the opportunities? And earlier this evening we talked about the wetland stormwater facility on Mountain Road, which is a good example of where there's opportunity for that connection. Then we want to make sure that we have a design that supports that. So those are the reasons this time, really based on the design and kind of the uniqueness of this location. It was recommended during the approved design many years ago that this be fenced.
Any follow-up?
Yes, thank you. So the reason why I've asked this question, and I've asked it before, is because after the Riverside development stormwater pond was constructed and the beautiful park that surrounds it, I understood, I believe that this was going to be the new standard for design of stormwater management ponds going forward. And I feel that we're now continually losing the opportunity to create outstanding green spaces for our residents. And these kinds of naturalized storm, very long way toward doing that and toward offsetting the impacts of urbanization and densification. So I really think that we need to work harder to ensure that we are creating the kinds of spaces that our residents are asking for, the kinds of spaces that will help to offset, as I say, the kinds of densifications that we are going to be looking for in the future.
Well said. I would just add to that, because I walk by this stormwater pond quite frequently, and it does have gates that are locked out onto a sidewalk that's very frequented by walkers and people with dogs and kids going to school. And it does also connect at one side to a school path. So if there was, my question is this, if there was to be some future, or could this be looked at to see whether there's remedial work that could be done? If there was a minimal amount, I'll say, of slope work to be done so that it could be open to the public. How would we come to that happy point? How would we make that happen? Go ahead.
To you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So I am aware, and maybe acting engineering manager Stuart West might want to say a few words here, but my understanding from the design is that there are components of the pond, the way it was designed, that would lead us as staff not to recommend it not be fenced. But I would, ask Mr. West if he could, Manager West, if he has any thoughts about, review of the pond at a future time to see what the opportunities might be.
Mr. West, are you able to help us with this?
Thank you, Director Slama. Unfortunately, the Mountain Croft Pond was really just designed for the drainage area of the Mountain Croft subdivision. There's not really necessarily any other contributing lands that would be within the town of Collingwood, that would really be contributing in the pond in a sense that would require a lot of remedial works at this time. Having said that, it would definitely be difficult to provide an adequate amount of slope around the trail, as what would happen, it would be to essentially have to fill the area around the trail. And by doing that, you're then reducing the amount of volume and storage within the pond as well. So really it unfortunately kind of impacts the operational and operational guide. So what am I trying to say? How the pond operates on a day-to-day basis. And then during major events, and unfortunately that would come at a cost and a redesign of the entire stormwater pond. So at this point, I'd say it's not something that we'd recommend. However, I'd look to Director Slama, or excuse me, yes, Director Slama or Manager Cole if they have any other thoughts on that matter as well.
Would be, really nice for our community. Councillor Baines, did you have a question?
No, Your Worship, I would just support that and support Councillor Doherty's position. I think this is hopefully a teachable moment for all council going forward in discussions with other developments, that the potential for this being incorporated into the larger community, I think, is a wonderful opportunity not to be missed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll bring this to a vote then. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next staff report is 7.6. This is PW 2023-03, Reduce Loads Review and Overweight Load Bylaw Update. Director Slama, would this be yours?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is with us this evening our Public Works Manager, Daniel Cole, and so he will be providing a summary on the bylaw updates for committee this evening.
Okay, thank you, Manager Cole. Over to you.
Thank you, Director Slama, and good evening, Madam Chair and members of committee. The purpose of the staff report is to provide for updated bylaws as they relate to the town's reduced load period and overweight load vehicle permitting. As the report was provided in detail and is administrative in nature, there will be no formal presentation. The following is provided as a highlight of the report. As noted in the report, both the reduced load restriction and oversized permitting bylaws are linked through their administration and application, and therefore are brought forward at the same time for Council's consideration and approval. Both bylaws were reviewed last in 2012 and have been brought forward through the 2022 Corporate Operational Plan. Reduced load bylaw. This bylaw allows the municipality to designate reduced loads on highways within the town's jurisdiction to protect our municipal infrastructure during spring thaw season when frost is coming out of the ground. The application of this bylaw is consistent with the Municipal Act, Highway Traffic Act, and follows the Ministry of Transportation guidelines and time periods. Changes proposed within the bylaw are administrative in nature, including updates to positions, corporate structures, and extensions of existing clauses for transparency. The proposed bylaw does remove one section of Hume Street from previously being restricted to improve logistics for moves to and from the industrial commercial area of town. This section of Hume Street has been reviewed by engineering and is a direct connection to other municipal and county roads which do not have load reduced restrictions in place. The oversize overweight bylaw. This bylaw provides for the issuing of oversized and overweight permits for loads, objects, and structures on highways under the town's care and control. Its application is consistent with the Municipal Act and Highway Traffic Act as well. Changes proposed are administrative in nature, including those for positions, corporate structures, and extension of existing clauses, again for transparency. We're happy to answer any questions of committee.
Would there be anyone online, Deputy Clerk, who wishes to speak to this report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We currently do not have any online participants at this time.
Thank you. I'll read in the motion that staff report PW 2023-03 be received and that council enact and pass the proposed bylaws to regulate reduced local periods and oversize overweight loads on our highways. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Potts, Councillor Baines. Would there be any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next staff report is labeled 7.7. This is PW 2023-05, Transit Advertising Update. And Director Slum, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So just another brief introduction. We do have Public Works and Transit Coordinator Chris Wozniak with us this evening, and he's going to provide a summary on the staff review of the potential for advertising on transit as another potential means to offset transit costs.
Good evening, Coordinator Wozniak. Please proceed.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of committee. I'm going to do a brief overview of the report that was submitted to council last week. The report's in response to a motion that was passed at the December 12th Development and Operations Committee to look at alternate revenues through advertising on public transit and related public transit infrastructure. This is the third time that we've explored advertising opportunities in the last 15 years in my time here. In the last previous two times, we've come out of it with advertising not being a really sustainable solution. However, this time after doing some research with some other transit authorities and of our local transit authorities, and with some third-party advertising providers, it seems that there is the potential for some advertising revenue. Now, I want to be clear that this is something that is not 100% administered by town staff. Doing a staff administrated advertising program is not sustainable with our given staff complement. So the majority, again, about 90% of TAs, transit authorities in Ontario, are using a third-party facilitator for advertising. And this would be the recommended solution for the town to pursue. Now, given the potential revenue, it's not something that we can just turn on and get going within the municipality. There are several key considerations. The first being the lack of a corporate advertising policy. This is extremely imperative, setting guidelines for advertising content, display size and limits within the town, as well as I wanted to add the point of engaging the public in actually implementing advertising in general, considering a lot of our public transit infrastructure, being vehicles, shelters, and the terminal, are traveling and operate within the Heritage District. I think it would be advantageous to engage the community to hear their input on how advertising may affect the heritage environment downtown. So what staff are recommending is that the town look at establishing a corporate advertising policy. And again, this is something that is not within our 2023 operational plan. So we recommend considering it for 2024 operational plan and budget considerations. And I'm happy to answer any questions that any member would have.
Okay, thank you very much for that report. Would there be any members of the public? Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We continue to not have any attendees on our Zoom call this evening.
Thank you. I'll read in the motion that staff report PW 2023-05, transit advertising update, be received, and that council directs staff to initiate the creation of a corporate advertising policy within a future year operational plan, and that once approved, council directs staff to proceed with an open market request for proposals for transit-specific advertising, and that staff provide council with an update of the outcome, and that any new revenue generated by third-party advertising on transit infrastructure be used to offset the operational costs of the overall transit system. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Baines, any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, I was going to vote, I thought.
Oh, he was going to vote. Okay, he's ready. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the very quick comment that I'm happy to see that there does seem to be some feasibility here and giving us the ability to offset some of our transit operational costs. And so I'll look forward to seeing the development of an advertising policy, which is a prudent way to proceed, and hopefully a successful open market request for a transit advertising provider.
Okay, Councillor Potts.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Hamlin. I just, excuse me, I just want to thank staff and Coordinator Wozniak for the work on this. Look forward to seeing it coming down the pipe. And obviously with our deputation tonight and the strong need for accessible transit, that was kind of one of my initiatives of why I wanted to put the motion forward to try to see if we can offset any cost to help fill that gap. So I look forward to that. So thanks for your work on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Ring.
Like both comments that have just been made, I'm looking forward to seeing that there's some way we could take advantage of the financial side of the advertising, and I'm glad that there, after 2 attempts prior, there is some feasibility to maybe raise some money. My only question is, and I know it's not something you do overnight, but do we really need to put off doing a policy? Like what would maybe I just don't know. What would be the cost in establishing the advertising policy that we have to put it off for a year?
Yes, can you answer that?
Absolutely. Thank you through the chair to Councillor Ring. Each year when we do the budget and we talk with council, we look at what the capacity of staff is to deliver the things that council's identified as priorities. And following the budget, we do a really good second check and put things in the operational plan. So really what we've done this year is filled up all of our policy capacity to develop that policy. If you wanted staff to look at developing the policy in 2023, we'd need to go back offline to look at other things that might be able to be deferred so that we could pull this one into 2023.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. And also to say that if staff knew that there was desire of council to proceed with that, if something else became impossible to complete, whatever reason, that you would come and advise us and allow us to backfill.
Go ahead, CEO. Yeah.
Absolutely. If it did find that something had fallen off the plate, it wasn't able to be awarded, or there was some capacity, then we'd be looking at what else we could do on the council priority list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baines.
Your Worship, Wayne Gretzky famously said, "You don't go where the puck is. Now you go where it will be." It's only a matter of time before this town will need such a policy to implement an advertising program, in my opinion, that will bring us additional revenues, and it'll be a great thing. So to get all this work done now, I think is prudent, and it's setting the table for a dinner in a couple of years, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the comments. We'll bring this to a vote then. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 8.1 is the Collingwood Heritage Committee, and it reads that the minutes of the Collingwood Heritage Committee meeting held January 16, 2023 be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Doherty, Deputy Mayor Fryer, are any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. So the next item for which there could be something are public delegations. Has anyone appeared online, Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no public delegations online this evening, but we did pass item 10. I don't know if there's staff that wanted to address anything this evening or not.
Okay. All right. Would there be any departmental updates this evening? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Madam Chair. Staff did provide some information to council that there was a very short partial bypass at the wastewater treatment plant last week, and I wasn't sure if there was any, if members had any questions on that. I can provide a little bit of information, which is that the partial bypass means that all of the raw sewage did go through a majority of the treatment plant. It just bypassed our UV disinfection. Basically, the UV disinfection just reaches a capacity and it flows into a bypass channel. At that point, staff add chlorine disinfection. So it does receive some form of chlorine disinfection. So again, the sewage did go through the full plant and received some disinfection. A partial bypass lasted less than 30 minutes, and it was approximately 41.5 cubic meters. On that day, we put 58,000 cubic meters through the wastewater treatment plant. So a very small amount relative to everything else that was treated at the wastewater treatment plant. And of course, in these situations of rain and snow melt, it is important to remember that the raw sewage is very diluted in those cases. So, of course, operational staff followed all our procedures, which is to notify the ministry. Our inspector was aware, provided the information to them, and then we do take samples and we provide the results of those samples to the ministry as required.
Thank you for that update. I see a question from our Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Meant to hold that one up.
Okay, that's okay.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin, and thank you to Director Slama. She had sent out an email to council advising of this last week, and I followed up with her because it had been noted that the ministry had identified a number of occurrences because of the reasons that were explained. And I was just trying to make sure I could properly answer if there was any media questions. I was wondering if there might be something come through. So, but for me, it also highlights that this is another instance that shows that the stormwater management system interrelates with the sanitary sewer treatment facility. And I just want to make sure that when I continue to ask that when we do have our non-core assets come forward sometime in the near future for review as far as the asset management plan and the funding goes, and and also review of the user fee asset coverage that we're doing, that we consider the fact that those two systems are very interrelated and what opportunities might be for how they're funded down the road. So, as I said, I appreciate the information from Director Salama in that regard.
Okay, thank you for
Thank you.
raising that. Are there any other departmental updates? Okay, seeing none. So I believe we're on to other business. And Councillor Doherty wants to speak to us about AMO. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for the opportunity. ABO made their pre-budget submission today to the Finance and Economic Affairs Committees of the Provincial Legislature. And I wanted to bring council up to date on the highlights of their point of view on their strategic, wanted to bring council up to date on their strategic objectives for 2023 that were reflected in that pre-budget submission. Generally, the AMO's highest priority in 2023 is housing and homelessness. The fall 2022 provincial legislation, in the view of AMO, severely damaged provincial municipal relationships. And there's every indication that more change is coming, and there has not been a significant shift in the overall provincial approach to date. The upcoming budget does provide an important focal point for AMO's efforts to influence provincial fiscal policy and relationship direction, with key messaging that would remind the government that municipalities are a major player in the provincial economy, accounting for $60 billion in annual revenues. And AMO will defend against any sense that municipalities can absorb funding cuts or that they have not made tough choices. Property taxes are high and getting higher, forcing investment of our own source revenues and making us do more with less. Municipalities agree that more houses must be built, but that Bill 23 jeopardizes Ontario's ability to meet this goal by undermining municipalities' ability to pay for infrastructure to support that growth, by creating significant uncertainty around roles and responsibilities, and by eroding municipal capacity to make informed planning decisions. So AMO's position on housing is that we need to operate on two tracks. First of all, to continue to identify and highlight the negative impacts of Bill 23 to inform a targeted course of corrections and hold the province accountable for poor policy decisions. And secondly, to focus on moving forward and helping the members to implement a new regime by pressing for follow-through on fiscal commitments and getting implementation on track with provincial municipal technical working groups, pushing ministries for clarification and supports for members, and pushing for a collaboration through an MOU table. The AMO pre-budget recommendations relative to housing are that the Government of Ontario should first fully offset the costs of implementing the Housing Supply Action Plans, which is estimated to be roughly $1 billion annually through to 2031. To work with municipalities to clarify the role of conservation authorities and regional governments in land use planning, ensuring sufficient capacity, a phased implementation, and transitional funding. And finally, to invite the municipal sector to the table as a full partner in future housing initiatives. AMO will take a slightly harsher stance in pre-budget narrative on homelessness. Homelessness in Ontario, in AMO's view, is a made in Ontario social, economic, and health disaster undermining our social and economic development efforts and the livabilities of our communities. It is a symptom of poor provincial policy choices in key areas, including income assistance rates, which have declined substantially in real terms since they were cut in 1990, downloading of community and supportive housing, leaving Ontario municipalities as the only local governments in Canada left to cope with the costs and demands that go far beyond what property taxpayers have the ability to pay. And finally, a lack of support for mental health and addictions, where funding and action has been slow, municipalities have been left to fill the gaps. Combined with the impact of the pandemic, these factors have overwhelmed the emergency shelters and response systems, and more funding is urgently required. Municipalities will do their part, but the province cannot continue to ignore this growing crisis. So AMO's pre-budget recommendations relative to homelessness are that the Government of Ontario should demonstrate leadership on this critical issue and bring together a broad range of partners to develop a multi-year action plan to end homelessness. And as a foundation for ending homelessness, the Government of Ontario should take immediate action to increase provincial assistance programs, increase the supply of deeply affordable housing, invest in community-based mental health and addictions services for homeless people, and finally, increase funding for the homelessness prevention program. So as I say, that is the gist of the pre-budget submission that was made today. And AMO is asking municipalities to support their position, which is, I think, the position of most of our 444 municipalities, working through local and social media channels, and to consider passing council resolutions in advance or close to the provincial budget. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to make that report.
Okay, well, thank you. Does anyone have any questions of Councillor Doherty? No. I'm just going to say I'm so grateful that you're involved in this and that AMO's taking what I think for AMO is a pretty, tough position with the province.
Yep.
And that so many of the action points around the budget are with respect to homelessness. Our province really needs to embrace a housing first strategy regardless of your income level. And I'm glad that that's being advanced. So, okay, well, that's great. Thank you. The other thing I had, was there anyone else who had other business? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I did have two, now I have three. With FCM also on the trail of the federal budget advocacy, I'll be making an appointment to meet with the MP shortly to go over our asks again, which I did previously report to council. And we are working on another strategy. I had another election readiness working group. It's kind of a strange name now because we advocate all year long with respect to budgets. But one of the top messages coming out of the federal government is that they aren't going to step into the place of provincial funding just because the province is going to back off and not do it. So I think the province is going to be under a lot of pressure because the feds are willing to support municipalities, but they're not going to let province off the hook for doing their duty. So the province is really going to have to pony up and do their job. So there was a question or a report made to council previously about FCM funding and the town's inability to qualify for some of the green municipal funds grants. And I had the opportunity at our last FCM meeting to speak to the senior outreach person from FCM for the Green Municipal Fund. And Rachel explained to me that it's not just Collingwood. It's when they did negotiated that funding, the original GMF funding program with the federal government, there were parameters set out, and 4 provinces, British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec, are on clean grids. So all of those provinces, municipalities in those provinces, have difficulty hitting the markers for that funding. They're aware of it, and they've noticed a reduction in applications because of it. And the good news is they're on top of it. They're going to try to see what they can do. But the new funding amounts that have come from the federal government, the parameters will be different. We'll have a lot more opportunity with respect to that fund. So I've passed that information along to the treasurer so that she's aware of it. And I just wanted council to know as well. And then the other thing, of course, what I mentioned earlier was if there's anything, and I don't know if it's something we talk about with developers, we haven't had this kind of high level builds within a small constrained area, that the number of contractors and workers that are coming into a construction site, particularly down on by the, I guess it's 31 Huron build there. And so the medical building, although they have their own challenges because it's free parking for their patients in that building, other town people are also coming to park in those spots because it's free, so they don't have to pay for parking downtown. But when you add the construction people on top of it, who are taking up literally both sides of the street along the back service road there, there's nothing left. So people are driving in circles. It's just a bit of a nightmare there. And I mean, I know I just park in one of the town lots and walk down to the medical building. But I guess my question through to planning is do we speak to developers about the potential? And I'm thinking right now, even with that 31 Huron build, if we even just cleared a way to parking down by where the boats would launch normally in the summer, to provide them an off-site parking where they could simply walk to the site still to work, but free up the parking for people going to the medical building. So I guess 2 questions. Number 1 is it something we talk about in our process? Number 2, is there something we can do about it now in just a conversation with the builders and the owners of the property?
Dr. Slama, can you take that one?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. So there was 431 Huron. There would have been a construction management plan that was signed as part of the site plan approval. So I'd like to take the information that you've provided this evening and talk with the engineering staff and see if that particular construction management plan addresses parking, and if that's something we can work with the developer on.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, sometimes you don't know there's a problem until you have a problem. Yeah. Okay, and any other business? Okay, so I just had one item, and that was to read in that I wanted to bring a motion at the next council meeting. So I'm going to just read it in a general way, and then I'll work with our deputy clerk to make it sound better. But basically, my motion would be that the mayor be authorized to write on behalf of council to the province, including all ministers engaged in setting accessibility requirements for transit across the province. 2, to the Simcoe County Warden and County Council, who's responsible for social services in our region. And 3rd, to the hospital board chair, who can make accommodations to patients with accessible transit needs, to raise the issues that we've heard here and to seek their involvement to resolving them. That'll be dealt with at a future meeting. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Hamlin. I think those are all really very normal things for us to approve. And unless staff advised against it, I'd be happy to make a motion to waive notice so that you could get on with those letters.
Okay, that'd be great. Go ahead, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a reminder, we're in standing committee.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Any decision will have to be ratified by council.
Oh, that's okay. I can still do the motion to the committee recommend to council.
The motion will be on the February 21st
Anyway.
council meeting
right, 'cause
anyway.
we haven't, okay, never mind. Scrap that.
Okay, so it'll be next week. Okay. And I could get the letters ready in the meantime. Okay, will do.
Okay.
All right, so I think
Hold it, Councillor
yes.
Ring.
Yes, Councillor Ring, go ahead.
Just quickly, and I totally forget, but I thought when you talked about it earlier during the night, you said there was 4 items, and you just had 3.
Oh, you're so good. Okay, so the fourth one, but it's for a meeting this Friday.
Oh,
So I won't be writing a letter. Yeah, I know, I was gonna, that's your, paying attention here. So it won't be a letter, and I'll just go and I'll relay what I'm hearing, and maybe by Monday I'll have something to say. Okay. All right, so moving for an adjournment, and that would be Councillor Potts. Okay, great. All those in favor? And thank you very much, everyone.
Here, here.